Chapter 678. What did he see? Yi Xian was sincerely apologizing to him. Just now, Yi Xian looked as if he would not stop until he was dead. He even cut half of Qi Yu's body into pieces extremely ruthlessly. In the blink of an eye, he looked guilty and apologetic. How could Qi Yu react to such a great change? Qi Yu was not the only one who was speechless. Even the members of the celestial court who were watching from afar were dumbfounded. No one knew Yi Xian's temperament better than them. It was a miracle that Yi Xian could take them out of the Wu tribe safely, let alone apologize to Qi Yu in person. In the hearts of the members of the celestial court, what kind of person was Yi Xian? He was cruel and vicious, decisive in killing, and would do anything to achieve his goal. He was also an extremely fierce person who believed in killing and leaving no one alive. But what did the members of the celestial court see today? Yi Xian was apologizing to Qi Yu. This was simply a fantasy. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed that such a thing would really happen. Yi Xian, what do you mean? Only after a full 10 breaths did Qi Yu come back to his senses and examine Yi Xian with a bewildered expression. Alas! Yi Xian sighed softly and said, in fact, the celestial court and the Wu tribe have no enmity. Although Yi killed the members of the celestial court first, it was only a personal matter between the celestial court and him. It was wrong for me to vent my anger on the Wu tribe. Here, I sincerely ask for your forgiveness. Looking at Yi Xian's sincere face, Qi Yu only felt extremely strange and became more cautious. He did not know what Yi Xian was playing. The Wu tribe is the authentic lineage of Pangu, and the 12 ancestors of sorcery in ancient times were formed by the essence and blood of the great god Pangu. I have always respected the Wu tribe. Today, because of my anger, I killed tens of thousands of people of the Wu tribe, which makes me feel guilty. I hope you can let me apologize to the 12 ancestors of sorcery in person, so that I can feel a little relieved. Yi Xian spoke frankly with assurance and showed an extremely ashamed expression. His voice was full of emotion and sincere words, and it was not an act. It was as if he really felt great regret for killing tens of thousands of people of the Wu tribe. As the saying goes, flattery always works. Moreover, Yi Xian's identity. Although Qi knew that Yi Xian was not as simple as he appeared on the surface, he could not see his purpose. Purpose. The ancestors of sorcerers are sleeping in the chaos and are not in the ancestral land of the sorcerer tribe. Fellow Yi, you don't have to apologize. You should take your heavenly court troops and leave the sorcerer tribe, Qi Yu said with a deep look in his eyes. Obviously, no matter what purpose Yi Xian had, as long as Yi Xian was sent away quickly, the Wu tribe would be able to avoid a disaster. When he called back the other ancient sorcerers, even if Yi Xian had a great trick, the Wu tribe would not be afraid. My friend, you're wrong. Although the 12 ancestors of sorcery are not here, I still have to apologize to them for destroying the ancestral sorcery temple. I hope you can let me go to the other ancestral sorcery temples and apologize to each ancestral sorcery statue one by one, Yi Xian said sincerely. Impossible. Qi Yu flatly refused and looked at Yi Xian with a gloomy look. The ancestral sorcery temple was the holy land of the Wu tribe and was divided into 12 temples. Today, Yi Xian had already destroyed one ancestral sorcery temple. If he went crazy again and destroyed the other ancestral sorcery temples, how could he explain it to the Wu tribe? Fellow Taoist, are you not giving this emperor face? Suddenly, Yi Xian's sincere face was no longer there. His whole person became gloomy and a touch of hostility surrounded him, as if he was extremely angry because of Qi Yu's refusal. Bang! Sun Wukong's iron staff suddenly slammed into the ground and there was a loud bang. Although he did not know what Yi Xian's purpose was, he could see that Yi Xian must have his own ideas. This also made him release a fierce demon aura and look like he was going to attack if there was any disagreement. My friend Qi Yu, since Yi Tiandi sincerely apologizes to the Wu tribe, you should follow his wish. Do you really want to see the celestial court and the Wu tribe go to war? Taoist Landia frowned and said. This. Qi Yu's face was gloomy and hesitant. He was very sure that Yi Xian must have an unknown purpose and it must have a great relationship with the ancestral sorcery temple. However, the situation was more powerful than the person. He was now at a disadvantage. If he really rejected Yi Xian, there would definitely be a big battle. This was not the result he wanted to see. Taking a step back, the ancestral sorcery temple did not have anything valuable. It was just a place of faith in the Wu tribe. As long as Yi Xian did not destroy the temple, it was fine to let him in. Okay, I can promise you, but you have to promise that after entering the ancestral sorcery temple, you will leave with your celestial court and you will not destroy the ancestral sorcery temple. Qi Yu finally made a decision and looked at Yi Xian solemnly. My friend, you can rest assured that after paying respects to the ancestral sorcery temple, I will definitely leave and will not do anything rash. Yi Xian cupped his hands and bowed, but there was a strange look of excitement in his eyes. Okay, I will personally lead the way for you. I hope you will keep your promise. A black cloud rose under Qi Yu's feet and he was the first to shoot into the distance. Obviously, Qi Yu was still worried about Yi Xian. He was afraid that Yi Xian would cause trouble in the ancestral sorcery temple. He could only accompany Yi Xian until he left with the celestial court. Brother, I will go with you. Sun Wukong said. The ancestral sorcery temple is indeed magical. I can also accompany you. Daoist Luya lightly smiled, but a trace of bewilderment flashed through his eyes. It was obvious that he didn't know what Yi Xian was planning to do. Okay. Yi Xian nodded. He was not afraid that Landia would follow him. After all, the aura of that half of the small cauldron was not obvious, as if it was an ordinary item. Yi Xian could only guess that the other half of the small cauldron might be in the other ancestral sorcery temples. He was not sure if he could really find it. Wait here for my return. If there are any sorcerer tribesmen who cause trouble, you can decide for yourselves. Yi Xian looked back at the sky-swallowing toad and the others. The meaning in his words was self-evident. Obviously, if the sorcerer tribesmen were to cause trouble, there was no need to show mercy and they could fight the sorcerer tribesmen again. Yes, Emperor of Heaven. The celestial court troops bowed. Auspicious clouds rose into the sky and the void rippled. Yi Xian and the other two walked together and disappeared from the pavilion in an instant. When Landia appeared, he made his attitude clear. Yi Xian had already made his decision. The sorcerer tribesmen could not be destroyed. Yi Xian understood this very well. However, he also used the threat of Landia to force Qi Yu to let him enter the other ancestral sorcery temples. This was his main goal. The other half of the small cauldron was too important to him. Yi Xian could not let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Fortunately, Qi Yu was forced to agree under threat. This made Yi Xian's heart tremble. He kept praying in his heart that he could find the other half of the small cauldron in the other ancestral sorcery temples. Chapter 679. The land of the sorcerer tribe was vast and there were a total of 12 ancestral sorcerer mountains. Each ancestral sorcerer mountain had an ancestral sorcerer temple, where the statues of the 12 ancestral sorcerers were enshrined. The ancestral sorcerer temple was not only the holy land of the sorcerer tribe, but it was also their belief in the 12 ancient sorcerers. Other than the worship that was held once every 10,000 years, no one was allowed to enter the ancestral sorcerer temple. However, today, the ancestral sorcerer temple welcomed an outsider. No, not just an outsider, but a great enemy. This person was Yi Xian. Under the hostile gazes of the sorcerer tribe, Yi Xian strolled into the ancestral sorcerer temple. The 12 ancient witches Dijiang, like a yellow sack, red like a pill fire, 6 legs and 4 wings, with no face, the ancestor of space speed. Gomang, green as bamboo, with the body of a bird and the face of a human, riding 2 dragons, the ancestor of the wood of the east. Zhurong, the head of a beast and the body of a human, covered in red scales, with fire snakes pierced through his ears and fire dragons under his feet. He was the fire ancestral shaman of the south. Rushu, the face of a human, the body of a tiger, covered in golden scales, a pair of wings on his shoulder blades, a snake pierced through his left ear, and 2 dragons under his feet, the western gold ancestral shaman. Gong Gong, the ancestor of water of the north, had the head of a python and the body of a human. He was covered in black scales, stood on a black dragon, and had a green python coiled around his hand. Xian Ming, it is a ferocious beast with bone spikes all over its body. It is the ancestor of rain. Hutu, she has a human body and a snake tail. She has 7 hands on her back and 2 hands on her chest. She holds a flying snake with both hands. She is the ancestral sorcerer of the central earth. Chang Liang, snake in mouth, snake in hand, tiger head, human body, 4 hooves, long elbows, ancestor of lightning. Candle Dragon, the head of a human and the body of a dragon. Its entire body is crimson red and it is the ancestor of time. Heavenly Wu, 8 heads, human face, tiger body, 10 tails, wind ancestor. ZZZ, human face, bird body, green snake hanging from ear, red snake in hand, ancestor of lightning. Shebi corpse, human face, beast body, ears like a dog, green snake hanging from his ears, ancestral shaman of the weather. The 12 ancestors of sorcery had strange shapes. Usually, they were in human form. Only when they were in battle would they reveal their true forms. This was also their strongest state. At this moment, under the guidance of Qi Yu, Yi Xian entered the Zhu Rong temple, where the statue of Zhu Rong was also enshrined. Different from the statue of Candle Dragon, this Zhu Rong temple was made from fire-red crystals. Once Yi Xian entered this place, he immediately sensed a violent sense of power growing inside the Zhu Rong temple. Yi Xian didn't sense the violent power vibration coming from the Zhu Rong temple at all. Instead, he looked at the entire Zhu Rong temple with his pair of deep eyes, as if he was looking for something. As for the so-called apology to the statue of the ancestor of Magi, it was nothing but a formality, and didn't seem to be sincere at all. At this moment, Qi Yu's expression was calm and his eyes were slightly gloomy. He was certain that Yi Xian was looking for something, but he could not understand. There were no treasures in the 12 ancestral sorcerer temples, so what was Yi Xian looking for? Qi Yu wasn't the only one who had this question. Sun Wukong and Lanya also had the same question. However, the 3 of them couldn't ask, so they could only accompany Yi Xian in silence and see what he was going to do. After 2 hours, Yi Xian finally walked out of the Zhu Rong temple. However, there was a trace of disappointment in his eyes. Obviously, he didn't find the half-cauldron in the Zhu Rong temple. Rumble. The 4 of them left the Zhu Rong temple and continued to the next ancestral sorcerer temple. Gomang Temple, 3 days of grass and wood. Yi Xian stayed here for half a day, but still found nothing. Rushu Temple. Gonggang Temple. Xianming Temple. After a full 7 days and 7 nights, Yi Xian had stepped foot into the 5 great temples. However, the disappointment in his eyes grew heavier and heavier, because there was no trace of the small cauldron in the 5 great temples. The sun shone down, and the sky was clear. An ancestral sorcerer temple was extremely illusory, and there was even a rumbling sound of chanting. The void in all directions was slightly distorted, like a dream bubble, giving people an extremely unreal feeling. In front of us is the Dijiang Temple, which is also the space ancestral sorcerer of our sorcerer tribe. Compared to other ancestral sorcerer temples, Dijiang ancestral sorcerer is involved in the power of space, and is also a figure of our sorcerer tribe. The 4 of them were walking slowly in the sky. Qi Yu was speaking in a deep voice, but his eyes were filled with reverence when he looked at the Dijiang Temple. Obviously, Qi Yu had great respect for Dijiang ancestral sorcerer. Dijiang? Space ancestral sorcerer. Hearing Qi Yu's words, Yi Xian murmured softly. His eyes lit up slightly, and the disappointment in his eyes gradually recovered. He got the half cauldron in the Candle Dragon's temple. According to Yi Xian's knowledge, the Candle Dragon and Dijiang were extremely powerful figures among the 12 ancestral sorcerers of the ancient times. Moreover, because they mastered the power of time and space, they could be said to be as close as brothers. The other half of the cauldron was very likely in the Dijiang temple. Thinking of this, Yi Xian's eyes showed a touch of passion, which also made him speed up his pace toward the Dijiang temple. Dijiang temple. There were ripples in the void, and the door of the Dijiang temple was opening. However, the space in this world was extremely unstable and showed signs of cracks from time to time. However, it also contained an extremely mysterious power of space, which allowed the Dijiang temple to stand safely on the peak of the ancestral sorcerer mountain. Without any hesitation or fear, Yi Xian strode into the Dijiang temple. This also made Qiyu frown slightly, but he did not say anything. He quickly followed Yi Xian into the Dijiang temple. The white jade altar, 3 animals and 4 fruits, the majestic statue of Dijiang, and the weak power of space were growing in the Dijiang temple. This was the scene that Yi Xian saw at the moment. The white jade altar was simple and unadorned, and the majestic statue of Dijiang was awe-inspiring. The entire Dijiang temple was empty, and everything in the temple could be seen at a glance. This also made Yi Xian squint his eyes, constantly looking for the other small cauldron. After a full 2 hours, Yi Xian withdrew his gaze, and disappointment appeared in his eyes again. There was no trace of the small cauldron in the entire Dijiang temple. It seemed that this trip to the Dijiang temple was in vain again. However, Yi Xian was somewhat unwilling to give up. He had already entered 6 ancestral sorcerer temples in a row, but he did not find any trace of the small cauldron. This already made him faintly disappointed. Just as Yi Xian was about to leave the Dijiang temple, his eyes slightly swept over the statue of Dijiang. He was suddenly stunned, and the aura around him instantly became chaotic. "What's this?" Yi Xian roared out with his heart trembling. Ever since Yi Xian entered the Dijiang temple, he'd been searching the entire Dijiang temple, but he'd forgotten about the statue in front of him. When he saw the eyes of the Dijiang statue, he was stunned on the spot, but his heart had long since been filled with monstrous waves. The eyes of the statue of Dijiang were forged from an unknown black jade. However, there was a weak, white light in the left eye. The white light was extremely weak, and it would have been impossible to discover it if he had not looked carefully. At that moment, Yi Xian clenched his fists tightly. His eyes swiveled around silently. He could see through the statue that there was half a piece of white jade in the left eye of Dijiang. Clearly, the artisans had embedded it into the statue when they forged it. Chapter 680. Found it. Yi Xian roared in his heart as he clenched his fists tightly. However, he didn't immediately make a move because this half of the cauldron was embedded in the left eye of the Dijiang statue. If he really dug it out now, Qiyu, who was beside him, would definitely stop him. "Calm down," Yi Xian warned himself to calm down. Although he tried his best to hide his abnormality, the 3 people beside him were all sage to be and were very sensitive to auras. How could they not sense Yi Xian's abnormality at this moment? "Brother, help me stop Qiyu." Suddenly, Yi Xian secretly transmitted his voice to Sun Wukong. This made Sun Wukong slightly stunned, but he quickly came back to his senses. The Battle Saint technique was quietly activated and the iron cudgel in his hand was slightly clenched. Bang! There was a loud noise and the earth shook. Yi Xian acted without any hesitation. He stepped on the ground and the entire ancestral sorcerer temple shook. A huge crack appeared on the ground. Yi Xian's entire body was heading toward Dijiang's statue. "How dare you!" Such a scene made Qiyu's expression change. He violently slashed out with the demonic saber in his hand, but Sun Wukong was already in front of him. An extremely fierce aura bloomed and an iron cudgel came crashing down on Qiyu's head. Bang! A loud explosion sounded out as the void exploded. The terrifying force produced by the collision of the two men's sabers and staffs directly turned the Dijiang temple into ashes. It was also at this moment that Yi Xian smashed the Dijiang statue into pieces with his palm, and the half of the small cauldron quietly fell into his hand. However, this scene was completely seen by Landia. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the half cauldron in Yi Xian's hand. However, Yi Xian was so fast that he did not let Landia see it clearly. He had already taken the half cauldron. "You're courting death." Dijiang's temple was destroyed in an instant. This made Qiyu furious. The demonic saber in his hand exploded the void for thousands of miles. Every slash of his saber brought about thousands of sky-splitting saber radiances that enveloped Sun Wukong and Yi Xian. Clang! Clang! The Sun Wukong battle sacred technique was extremely terrifying, and its battle prowess was comparable to Qiyu's. On the other hand, Yi Xian had obtained half of the small cauldron and was no longer as humble as before. The heaven-destroying halberd violently struck towards Qiyu. "Fellow Taoists, please calm down. Don't hurt the harmony between us." Landia frowned slightly, and the gourd in his hand rippled out. An extremely terrifying aura bloomed, directly blocking the two sides, and unknowingly resolving the beginning of the battle. "Landia, I gave you face, but this Yi Xian is so ambitious that he destroyed the statue of ancestral sorcerer Dijiang. Don't you want to give me an explanation?" Qiyu roared, his face extremely red. "Explain." Yi Xian sneered. The heaven-punishing halberd rumbled as it released a killing intent that soared into the heavens. He pointed the halberd in his hand at Qiyu and said, "Do I still need to give you an explanation after killing you? Brother, although it's unfair to join forces against the enemy, I can't rest easy if I don't kill this person. Today, I can only join forces with you to kill him." "Please don't take it to heart," Yi Xian said coldly. "Brother, there's no need to explain. Just kill him directly," Sun Wukong replied coldly. Sun Wukong replied coldly. It was obvious that he wasn't a pedantic person. He knew that Yi Xian and the shaman clan were at odds with each other. If he still insisted on a fair battle, then when the other shamans arrived, the two of them would definitely be in danger. As for Landia, he was an extremely unstable factor. The two of them could not count on him at all. The only right choice was to kill Qiyu and leave the sorcerer tribe. Calamity Transcender Transformation. Rumble. The Tongtian in the fog was sublimated to the extreme. Yi Xian's combat strength was rising steadily. After 7 days of secretly swallowing elixirs, Yi Xian's injuries had already recovered by 70%. He could even barely use the Tribulation Transcender transformation once. However, this would cause even greater sequelae for him. But Yi Xian could not care so much. After all, there was no room for reconciliation between him and the sorcerer tribe. Kill. The heaven-destroying halberd was boundless, and it smashed toward Qiyu with a dark light. Sun Wukong's battle saint technique was activated violently. An iron staff that seemed to be able to pierce through the sky also smashed toward Qiyu at this moment. Clang! 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 The iron staff flew across the sky, and the halberd suppressed the world. When Sun Wukong and Yi Xian joined forces, they directly put Qiyu in danger. He did not even have the strength to fight back. He could only passively suffer the violent attacks of the two powerful figures. Bang! Sun Wukong's staff smashed Qiyu's chest, and Yi Xian's halberd pierced through Qiyu's waist. Qiyu suffered an unimaginable injury, but he still madly slashed out with the demonic saber in his hand. The bright and sharp saber light also forced the two of them to retreat. Rumble! Run! Without any hesitation, and without daring to stay, Qiyu frantically fled into the distance, covered in blood. However, he was roaring loudly, and an extremely mysterious scripture came from his mouth. "We can't let him go." Yi Xian roared ferociously. He took a step forward, tore through the void, and violently chased after Chi Yu. Sun Wukong followed closely behind, and a chase appeared in the sorcerer tribe's world. At this moment, Lan Yu frowned, and his eyes flashed with uncertainty. He was not shocked because the two of them wanted to kill Chi Yu, but because he hurriedly glanced at the small cauldron that Yi Xian had obtained. The heaven-shattering cauldron? Impossible, absolutely impossible. It's impossible for the heaven-shattering void cauldron to appear in the three realms. Lan Yu's voice trembled, and there was fear in his eyes, as if he had thought of something terrifying. Lan Yu kept calming himself down, and it was only after dozens of breaths that he regained his composure. His eyes turned slightly, and he took a step forward to chase after the three of them. In the sorcerer tribe's world, the sky was chasing after him. Chi Yu had suffered an unimaginable calamity. Two supreme figures were ruthlessly attacking him. Although he was an ancient sorcerer of the sorcerer tribe and was known as an ancient demon god, he did not dare to fight at all when faced with the joint attack of two supreme figures. Sorcerer blood splattered into the sky, and shrill roars were endless. Chi Yu was fleeing for his life. He formed a mysterious sorcerer seal with both hands, as if he was summoning some kind of mysterious power to descend. However, he was being chased by two people, and the seals in his hands were constantly interrupted, making it impossible for him to use them. Save the ancient sorcerer. Such a huge commotion had long attracted the attention of the sorcerer tribe. Hundreds of them were rushing over. Although they knew that they were no match for Yi Xian and Sun Wukong, Chi Yu's life was too important. Even if they died in Yi Xian's hands, they had to let Chi Yu escape this death. I'll kill one if one comes. I'll kill two if two come. Yi Xian growled sinisterly. He did not show any mercy at all. He had a feud with the sorcerer tribe. Since he had found the small cauldron, he would make the sorcerer tribe pay a heavy price before he left. Bang! 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 The halberd flew across the sky, and the souls of the dead wailed. Every time Yi Xian struck out with his halberd, he would take the life of a great sorcerer. Sun Wukong was also an extremely ferocious and unruly figure. The two of them did not show any mercy and directly turned the world into a blood-red slaughterhouse. Chapter 681. 12 Capital Heaven Divine Wraith Formation. Rumble. Half of the hundreds of great shamans died tragically, but it also bought Chi Yu some time to catch his breath. This also allowed him to complete the mysterious wizard mantra in his hand. Terrifying wizard light rumbled and rose in the entire wizard world. Bang! 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 The 12 ancestral shaman mountains rumbled and shook in all directions on the vast land. 12 huge trenches appeared, and 12 pitch-black banners rose from the cracked ground. An extremely terrifying aura covered the entire wizard world. 12 Capital Heaven Divine Wraith Formation. This was the strongest formation of the wizard race, and it was also a killing formation between heaven and earth. It was also one of the greatest treasures of the wizard race. There were 3 ultimate formations in heaven and earth. The heavenly cycle star formation was set up by the primordial demon court's Eastern Emperor Tai, and it had 365 primordial star gods presiding over it. Its power could destroy the heavens and the earth, and it could even topple the 3 realms. The fairy slaying sword formation. During the great god investiture tribulation, the 4 great saints worked together to break the fairy slaying sword formation. From this, one could see how terrifying this formation was. The last ultimate formation was the wizard race's 12 Capital Heaven Divine Wraith Formation. It was an extremely terrifying killing formation from ancient times. Legend had it that if the 12 ancient shamans controlled this formation, they could condense Pangu's true body. Even saints would have to retreat. It was also said to be the number 1 ultimate formation in the 3 realms. However, this legend had been around for a long time, but no one had ever seen it. The 12 Capital Heaven Divine Wraith Formation was filled with murderous aura. Although it was not controlled by the 12 ancient shamans and was only summoned by Qiyu, it was still extremely terrifying. The 12 black banners were filled with murderous aura, and the 12 demon god Dharma appearances appeared. The pitch-black and terrifying aura covered the sky, and the roars of ferocious demons could be heard from all directions. The 12 capital heaven divine wraith formation. Yi Xian stood with his halberd, and his eyes instantly turned serious. Even Sun Wukong's expression changed slightly. Obviously, the number 1 ultimate formation in the 3 realms was well known. You killed my people and destroyed my temple. Even if I die, I want you to die with me. Qiyu roared madly and furiously. A large amount of blood seeped out from the corners of his mouth, and his face was extremely pale. Clearly, controlling the 12 divine beings' slaughtering formation by himself had caused him to suffer a great backlash. After all, the 12 divine beings killing formation was a peerless formation. The murderous aura contained in it was too terrifying. Otherwise, it would not be known as the number 1 ultimate formation in the 3 realms. Although Qiyu had the cultivation base of an ancient shaman, he had no choice but to do this. Fellow Taoist, stop. Suddenly, Taoist Landia flew over on a cloud. He looked at Qiyu seriously, and his voice reverberated between heaven and earth. Landia, you and Yi Xian bullied my Wu tribe. When the ancestor of sorcery returns, he will definitely seek justice from you. Qiyu roared with hatred. His eyes were red, and he looked at Landia with hatred. You. Landia frowned, and a grave look appeared in his eyes. He had only come to the Wu tribe to help Yi Xian and let him leave safely. He did not expect things to become so serious. Landia could not afford to offend the 12 ancient shamans. Although he would not be in danger of dying, offending the Wu tribe was definitely not his intention. Pretentious. Putting on airs. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Suddenly, just as Landia was in a dilemma, Yi Xian slowly walked toward Qiyu with the heaven-destroying halberd in his hand. He looked at Qiyu with disdain, as if he did not take the 12 divine beings' slaughtering formation seriously at all. Brother, be careful. Sun Wukong's expression changed slightly, and he secretly reminded Yi Xian. As the 12 demon god Dharma Laksana stretched across the sky, they were releasing boundless evil spirit. If Qiyu really activated this formation, even Yi Xian would be in danger. It was entirely possible that he would die here. Yi Xian did not respond to Sun Wukong's reminder. Instead, a strange smile appeared on his face as he looked at Qiyu. He even hooked his finger and said, "Come, let me see the 12 divine beings' slaughtering formation." As Yi Xian finished speaking, Landia suddenly looked at Yi Xian. His eyes trembled slightly, and he looked at Yi Xian as if he was looking at a madman. He said in a serious voice, "Yi Xian, are you crazy? How can you resist this formation? Do you think he dares to activate this formation?" Yi Xian smiled strangely and looked straight at Qiyu. This also made Qiyu clench his fists tightly. His face was already extremely red, and he gritted his teeth so hard that they creaked. However, there was no surprise in his eyes when he looked at Yi Xian. It seems that I guessed right. You can't control the 12 divine beings' slaughtering formation at all. If you really activate this formation, not only will you be devoured by it, the boundless evil spirit contained in this formation will also destroy the entire sorcerer world. All of you sorcerer tribesmen will die as well. Yi Xian said sinisterly. His voice was even more resolute and decisive. Yi Xian lil, air. Qiyu shouted at Yi Xian word by word. However, his trembling body betrayed his true emotions at that moment. It was obvious that Yi Xian was right. He did not dare to activate this formation at all. Just as Yi Xian had said, he could not control the 12 divine beings' slaughtering formation. If he really activated this formation, not only would he die, but all of the sorcerer tribesmen would also die in the boundless evil spirit. Of course, if the 12 divine beings slaughtering formation was really activated, Yi Xian and the others would also die tragically on the spot. This was simply an outcome of mutual destruction. However, Qiyu did not dare to do so, because the consequences of doing so would be the death of the entire sorcerer tribe along with Yi Xian. Actually, I am a very reasonable person. As long as you hand over De Yi, I will leave with my people without another word. Yi Xian's smile disappeared as he spoke in a low voice. Impossible. Qiyu's expression changed drastically, and he rejected sternly. De Yi was the mainstay of the sorcerer tribe. If he really handed it over to Yi Xian, De Yi would definitely die. Impossible. Yi Xian slowly shook his head, and his eyes gradually turned cold. He said, "You have to think about it carefully. Is the entire sorcerer tribe more important, or is De Yi more important? Do you want to see the entire sorcerer tribe die with De Yi?" Everything was silent, and the world was silent. When Yi Xian finished speaking, Qiyu was stunned on the spot. His arrogant head drooped down, but his tightly clenched fists and trembling body proved that his mind was in turmoil. "All right, I promise you." After a full 10 breaths of time, Qiyu suddenly raised his head and looked at Yi Xian, but there were tears of blood in his eyes. His voice was dead silent, as if he had lost his soul. He could not afford to risk Qiyu. If he was alone, he could choose to die together with Yi Xian. However, the entire sorcerer tribe was behind him, and he could not activate the 12 divine beings slaughtering formation and let the entire sorcerer tribe die with Yi Xian. He could not afford to gamble with Qiyu, and he could see that Yi Xian was a crazy person. He was a person who would do anything to achieve his goals. At this moment, only by sacrificing De Yi could Yi Xian retreat safely and let the sorcerer tribe survive. Chapter 682. As the saying goes, a wise man submits to circumstances. Your choice is undoubtedly correct. Yi Xian smiled, giving people a feeling of spring wind and rain. The weapons stopped, and the world was silent. The 12 divine beings killing formation was removed, and Yi Xian and Sun Wukong also put away their weapons. The world was clear again, but great humiliation filled the hearts of every sorcerer. Since the beginning of the world, the sorcerer tribe had been strong and domineering. Even in the face of the ancient demon court, they were extremely fierce. But today, they were bullied by Yi Xian. This was simply something that had never happened before, and it was a great humiliation to them. Every sorcerer was extremely angry, but they dared not speak out. The seed of hatred had been planted, and it would definitely blossom and bear fruit in the future. Go and bring De Yi here. Qiyu's voice was a little tired and full of decadence. No need, I'll come myself. Suddenly, a ray of sorcerer light bloomed, and an illusory figure came from the horizon. His body was covered by sorcerer light, and only his head was intact. Who else could it be but De Yi? Yi Xian. De Yi, the peerless expert of the sorcerer tribe, had his body destroyed by Yi Xian in the battle of the celestial court, and only his head escaped back to the sorcerer tribe. But he had never thought that Yi Xian would kill the sorcerer tribe. But as a great sorcerer and a peerless expert of the sorcerer tribe, he could not escape in the face of the sorcerer tribe's life and death. From the beginning to the end, he had seen everything that had happened to the sorcerer tribe. Even ancient sorcerer Qiyu was unable to save them. If he did not appear, this disaster would eventually bring disaster to the sorcerer tribe. De Yi wasn't afraid of death, nor was he afraid of death. He knew that only by dying would the witch clan be able to survive this calamity. However, he was also very happy, because after he died, Yi Xian would also fall in the near future, because the witch clan wouldn't let him off. His body was destroyed, and his cultivation fell greatly. Even if De Yi did not die today, it would take at least 10 million years to reassemble his body, and he would never be able to step into the sage to be. He had long seen no hope. Very good, you've appeared. Rumble. Heaven and earth were turned upside down and the stars moved. Yi Xian reached out with his palm and directly restrained De Yi. He pressed his palm on De Yi's head and a cold murderous intent flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian, come and kill me. After falling into Yi Xian's hands, De Yi was not afraid at all. Instead, he laughed maniacally and looked at Yi Xian with hatred. I admire those who aren't afraid of death. Sadly, you aren't one of them. Today, I shall send you on your way, Yi Xian calmly spoke. His palms and fingers glowed as though he was about to kill De Yi in the next instant. Yi Xian, don't be too complacent. You can kill me today, but don't forget that in the future, when the ancestor of sorcerers appears, all the ancient sorcerers will return and avenge me. De Yi sneered and looked at Yi Xian with pity. Looking at De Yi's heroic appearance, Yi Xian's lips curled into a strange smile and said, what a pity, you won't live to see that day. You can go to hell now. Yi Xian cruelly said as he slapped his palm towards De Yi. This caused De Yi to close his eyes and reveal an expression of relief. Stop! Suddenly, a trembling voice sounded out from afar. Two figures shot over, and it was this voice that caused Yi Xian to frown. He raised his head to look at the people who'd arrived. Two streaks of light arrived in the blink of an eye and instantly appeared in front of Yi Xian. When the light dissipated, the moon fairy and Kwa Fu also appeared in Yi Xian's eyes. Xiao Yi, do you want to save him? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and looked embarrassed. He looked straight at the goddess of Moon Palace. Yi Xian, you can't kill him. The goddess of Moon Palace bit her lips and her voice trembled. She looked at Yi Xian pleadingly. Yi Tiandi, I promise you that as long as you spare De Yi's life, he will never be your enemy from now on. Kwa Fu's face was pale. He bowed to Yi Xian and no longer looked as arrogant as before. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't look at Kwa Fu at all. He looked straight at the goddess of Moon Palace and said calmly, give me a reason not to kill him. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the goddess of Moon Palace had a complicated look on her face. She didn't know how to answer Yi Xian. Her eyes were filled with tears and she was speechless. Since you can't give me a reason, he must die today. Yi Xian's voice was cold. He didn't plan to let De Yi go just because the goddess of Moon Palace pleaded for him. Xiao Yi, he can kill me if he wants to. You don't have to plead for me. When the goddess of Moon Palace appeared, De Yi was shouting excitedly. Obviously, his pride wouldn't allow a woman to beg for his life. Bang! Suddenly, under the dumbfounded gazes of De Yi and Yi Xian, the moon fairy actually knelt down as tears rolled down from her eyes. Yi Xian, if you really want to kill him, then kill me. I'm willing to exchange my life for yours. I just beg you to spare Yi's life. The goddess of Moon Palace said through gritted teeth. Are you forcing me to do this? After a full 3 breaths of time, Yi Xian slowly exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His voice trembled to the extreme. Yi once saved my life. I've never forgotten that. Today, I'm willing to die for him. I just beg you to spare his life. Heaven Emperor, why don't you leave now? Shengong bowed and said. Heaven Emperor, please spare his life for the sake of the goddess of Moon Palace. The sky-swallowing toad was the most ferocious and bloodthirsty, but he was also speaking to Yi Xian. As the two of them spoke, a large number of the Celestial Court Immortals spoke up. Obviously, the Celestial Court Immortals knew about the relationship between Yi Xian and the goddess of Moon Palace. Naturally, they had to speak up at this moment to give Yi Xian a way out. This was their way of being subjects. At this moment, Yi Xian's murderous intent dissipated. He became extremely quiet. No one knew what he was thinking. After a full 10 breaths of time, Yi Xian finally raised his head to look at the fairy Guanghan. Chang Yi, you asked me to spare his life. Have you ever thought that if I wasn't his match, he would spare my life in the celestial court? Yi Xian said calmly. As Yi Xian's voice rang out, the goddess of Moon Palace was stunned. Yes, if Yi Xian wasn't De Yi's match, how could De Yi spare Yi Xian's life? The goddess of Moon Palace couldn't refute. She didn't know how to refute. However, De Yi had saved her life in the past. If she let De Yi die tragically in front of her, she couldn't accept it. Buzz! Yi Xian flipped his palm and fingers. Divine light surged. He raised his palm again and was about to kill De Yi on the spot. No! The goddess of Moon Palace suddenly stood in front of De Yi. She looked at Yi Xian bitterly. A line of clear tears flowed out of her eyes. Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. His black pupils gradually turned pale. The merciless aura of the 6 desires suddenly bloomed. He looked at the goddess of Moon Palace with a gloomy murderous intent. Chapter 683. He is my sworn brother. How can I watch him die in your hands? The Moon Fairy cried out in grief. She was already in tears. At this moment, the members of the Celestial Court were watching in silence. The sorcerer tribe was silent, the killing intent dissipated once more. In the end, Yi Xian didn't make a move. This also caused Qua Fu to reveal a happy expression. He knew that De Yi had managed to survive from Yi Xian's hands. Celestial Emperor, it's time for us to go back. Shen Gongbao bowed. Yes, it's time to go back. Yi Xian nodded slowly. However, what happened next stunned everyone. It was as if they had fallen into a dream. They could not believe their eyes. Bang! With a muffled sound, light and shadow intertwined. Under everyone's stunned gaze, Yi Xian quietly appeared in front of De Yi. The merciless qi of the 6 desires bloomed violently. The horrible palm suddenly slapped on De Yi's head. Ah! De Yi screamed. However, his head was collapsing inch by inch. He had never thought that Yi Xian would attack him violently. He really ignored the goddess of Moon Palace and killed him. Die! Yi Xian let out a cruel roar as his eyes became extremely brutal. His palm spat out an enormous force as he slammed it into De Yi's hand. His tyrannical voice reverberated in all directions, whoosh, whoosh. The wind blew and De Yi turned into ashes. Even when he was dying, he could not understand why Yi Xian suddenly killed him at the last moment when he had given up on killing him. De Yi was not the only one who could not understand. Even the crowd was speechless. No one knew what Yi Xian was thinking. Brother! The goddess of Moon Palace cried out in grief. Qua Fu trembled and roared. Countless members of the sorcerer tribe were crying. Why? Why did you have to kill him? Suddenly, the Moon Fairy looked at Yi Xian with tears in her eyes. She questioned Yi Xian loudly. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not answer the Moon Fairy's question. Instead, he looked at the Moon Fairy coldly. Remember, you belong to me in life, and you belong to me in death. You and I are already married, and your life is mine. Without my permission, you can't die for anyone. Now, follow me back to the Celestial Court. Yi Xian said coldly. No, I won't go back with you. I hate you. The Fairy of the Moon Palace gritted her teeth and scolded Yi Xian loudly. She retreated with tears in her eyes and then rode a cloud into the distance. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. When he died tragically on the spot and the Moon Fairy flew away, the members of the Celestial Court had not recovered from their shock. They just looked at Yi Xian's back with a complicated expression. Yi Xian did not chase after the Moon Fairy. He just watched her go quietly. He was never a bootlicker, and he would never compromise for any woman. Today, De Yi had to die, because this was an explanation he had to give to the Heavenly Court. Although they seemed to be pleading for De Yi, that was because they knew about the relationship between him and Fairy Guanghan. That was why this happened. However, Yi Xian knew very well that he had killed too many demon kings and immortals in the celestial court. If he let Yi go because of a woman, how could he deserve the title of celestial emperor? How could he convince the members of the celestial court? Therefore, Yi had to die. No one could change this outcome. This was also the explanation Yi Xian gave to the dead members of the celestial court. He killed tens of thousands of people from the sorcerer tribe, destroyed the ancestral sorcerer temple, and even killed Yi when the moon fairy pleaded for mercy. These were all things he had to do. As a leader, he could not disappoint his subordinates. He had to reward those who did well and investigate those who did wrong. This was the only way to create the strongest orthodoxy. At this moment, the members of the celestial court had a subtle change in their emotions. They looked at Yi Xian with a look of awe that they had never had before. In the past, they all had their own goals. Some were for cultivation resources, some were for the revival of the Jia order. However, now, each of them felt a sense of belonging. This was a sense of belonging to Yi Xian and the celestial court. Yi had killed countless demon kings and immortals in the celestial court. Yi Xian had personally led them to kill the sorcerer tribe. He had even ignored the moon fairy and killed Yi. Yi Xian had completely done an eye for an eye. How could the members of the celestial court not feel respect for what he had done? Beat the gongs and retreat, Yi Xian said in a low voice. This also caused the members of the celestial court to wake up quickly. The yellow turbaned strongmen beat the war drums and the golden clouds that covered the sky rose into the sky. Fellow cultivator, please come to the celestial court for a gathering. Yi Xian looked back at Landia and smiled. That's what I was thinking. Landia nodded slightly and agreed. Brother, back then, you caused havoc in the celestial court. You ate the peaches of immortality and swallowed the golden elixir. This time, I'm in charge of the celestial court. You can stay in the peach garden and I'll offer you the best immortal wine and golden elixir. Brother, please come to the celestial court with me. Yi Xian smiled and invited Sun Wukong. Ha, a worthy younger brother invites me. How can I refuse? Sun Wukong laughed maniacally. Dong, dong, dong. The war drums of the celestial court beat and the golden clouds that covered the sky rose into the sky. Yi Xian led the members of the celestial court and finally left the sorcerer tribe's world. However, the news of his conquest of the sorcerer tribe had spread throughout the three realms and brought great shock to the three realms. Yi Xian, you brat, the sorcerer tribe will remember what you did today. You won't live for long. Chi Yu held the demonic saber in his hand and roared angrily in the sorcerer tribe's world, causing the sorcerer tribe to roar with hatred. Summon the sorcerer sky token and summon the rest of the ancient sorcerers. Chi Yu roared crazily. On this day, a black mottled token flew out of the sorcerer tribe's world and directly broke through the sorcerer tribe's world and appeared in the three realms. The 33rd heaven of the celestial court. Palaces rose from the ground and the sky was filled with immortal light and flowing clouds. The entire celestial court was in full swing. Countless yellow-scarfed strongmen and heavenly soldiers were rebuilding the dilapidated celestial court. In the celestial emperor's palace, Yi Xian and Sun Wukong sat side by side while Landia sat to the side. The three of them were drinking and chatting with smiles on their faces. Thank you for coming to help. Otherwise, the celestial court's trip to the sorcerer tribe would not have gone so smoothly. Yi Xian raised his cup and toasted Landia. Then, he drank all the wine in his cup. You're too humble. I don't deserve your praise. Landia smiled and drank all the wine in his cup. It was also at this moment that he put down his cup and smiled at Yi Xian. He said, however, there's one thing that I don't understand. I wonder if Yi Tiandi can explain it to me. There's no harm in asking. Yi Xian smiled. In the Dijiang temple, I seem to have seen the celestial emperor obtain an item. I wonder what kind of treasure it is. Can I take a look? Landia said solemnly. Fellow Taoist, you must be mistaken. I destroyed the Dijiang temple on impulse. I never obtained any treasures. Yi Xian smiled and poured himself another cup of wine. Then, he drank all the wine in one gulp. However, a hint of coldness flashed through his eyes. Obviously, the mysterious cauldron was of great importance. Yi Xian would never admit it, let alone show it to Landia. After all, Landia was extremely mysterious and the gourd in his hand was extremely terrifying. Yi Xian did not want to fail miserably. I'm a little tired. I won't see you out. Yi Xian put down his cup. Although he was smiling, he was also asking him to leave. This also made Landia's expression change slightly. He took a deep look at Yi Xian, then smiled and said, "Since the Celestial Emperor is tired, then I'll take my leave. I hope that I can reunite with you again at the Ginseng Fruit Festival 30,000 years later." After Landia finished speaking, his body suddenly became illusory. He turned into a wisp of immortal smoke and disappeared without a trace. A worthy younger brother, this Taoist Landia's cultivation is so terrifying, Sun Wukong said solemnly. First there was Hung Jun, then there was Tian. Taoist Landia came first. Yi Xian murmured to himself, this Taoist Landia is too mysterious, and his attitude is unclear. We have to be careful. Chapter 684. Brother, do you have a deep friendship with Zhen Yuanzi? Otherwise, why would Landia come to help you out of respect for Zhen Yuanzi? Goku suddenly asked. Hearing Goku's words, Yi Xian slowly shook his head and said, Emperor Ziwei is on good terms with me, and Emperor Ziwei is Zhen Yuanzi's disciple. I've also seen Zhen Yuanzi several times, but we don't have much of a friendship. Brother, Zhen Yuanzi and I are sworn brothers, but we seem to be united on the surface, but we're divided at heart, just like the Bull Demon King in the past. It's just that this person is known as the ancestor of earthly immortals, and is extremely extraordinary among the sage-to-be. You have to be careful. Goku warned. Yi Xian slowly nodded. Just as Goku had said, this great immortal Zhen Yuan always gave him a mysterious feeling. Although this person seemed to be kind, he was absolutely not as simple as he appeared to be. A worthy younger brother, your skills didn't come out of thin air. Obviously, you were taught by someone. I wonder who your master is. Goku solemnly asked while Yi Xian was deep in thought. Yi Xian was startled, and a wisp of caution flashed through his eyes. It should be known that asking about someone's master was an extremely taboo behavior, unless the person took the initiative to tell. However, when Yi Xian looked at Goku, he saw a dignified look in the latter's eyes, as if he had something to say to him. This also startled Yi Xian, as he knew that Goku would definitely not speak without thinking. However, when it came to master, Yi Xian didn't know where to start, because he really didn't know who Yuan Ling was. Moreover, the two of them had long been like fire and water, and there would be a life and death battle sooner or later. Brother, please don't blame me. I got my skills from the immortal scripture, but the person who taught me this method is extremely mysterious. Even I don't know his true identity. Yi Xian said bluntly. Looking at Yi Xian's self-deprecating expression, Goku's eyes froze, and his face became solemn. When I left Mount Lingtai Fengsuan, my master, Patriarch Bodhi, warned me that your master is an extremely extraordinary person, and you're just his puppet. You must be careful in the future. As Goku's words fell, Ye's face suddenly changed, and he suddenly looked at Goku's face, and his face became extremely flushed. After all, ever since he entered the Earth Immortal Realm, even saints didn't know of Yuan Ling's existence. However, Patriarch Bodhi had actually said this to Goku. Clearly, Patriarch Bodhi definitely knew who Yuan Ling's true identity was. Brother, did Patriarch Bodhi say who he is? Yi Xian asked with a trembling voice. His eyes shone brightly, and his heart was in turmoil. Goku shook his head helplessly when he saw how agitated Yi Xian was. My master is free and unfettered in the three realms. He doesn't care about the disputes of the three realms. He didn't tell me who your master is. Disappointment flashed through Yi Xian's eyes, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye. The thought of going to Mount Lingtai Fengsuan rose in his heart. Clearly, he could only find traces of Yuan Ling if he personally went to see Patriarch Bodhi. Goku sighed when he saw Yi Xian in deep thought. A worthy younger brother, I know what you're thinking, but I still have to advise you not to disturb Patriarch Bodhi. Since my master didn't tell me the truth, he won't tell you even if you go and ask. Why? Yi Xian was stunned. My master is very powerful. Even I can't see through him. Moreover, he has never participated in the disputes of the three realms. Even if you beg him, he won't tell you. This is also to avoid being involved in this great calamity of the world. Goku spoke tirelessly. He paused slightly at this point, and a hint of seriousness flashed across his eyes. He continued, there's one more thing I want to tell you. The ancient demon court has already appeared. The Eastern Emperor Tai and Di Jun have reappeared in the world. As the saying goes, there can't be two suns in the sky and two rulers in the people. There can only be one celestial court in the world. You must be careful. Ancient demon court. Yi Xian was already shocked by the news of Yuan Ling. At this moment, he heard the news of the ancient demon court from Goku, which made him frown. A worthy younger brother, I have to tell you that the two celestial emperors of the ancient demon court are the strongest experts below the sage realm. They are only one step away from stepping into the sage realm. They are only stronger than the 12 ancestors of the ancient sorcerers. If they really want to take back the celestial court, you must not face them head-on, Goku warned solemnly. The strongest experts below the sage realm? Yi Xian murmured, and a look of surprise flashed across his eyes. According to what Yi Xian knew, there were only a few realms of sage to be. From the early stage of sage to be, one could sever one's corpse, two's corpse, and become a sage. One had to know that Chi Yu was only comparable to a sage to be who had severed two's corpse. When he activated the Calamity Transcender transformation, he would not be at a disadvantage. What did the strongest expert below the sage realm mean? Looking at the puzzled look on Yi Xian's face, Goku slowly explained, the path of sage to be is not what you think it is, brother. As Goku slowly explained, he finally unveiled the mysterious veil of the sage to be realm. As everyone knew, there were three paths to becoming a sage. The first was to become a sage through merit, the second was to sever three's corpse, and the third was to prove one's Tao through strength. However, one should not forget that this was not the sage to be realm. This was the way of becoming a sage, and it had nothing to do with the sage to be realm. The way of becoming a sage was to let a person become a sage quickly. This was a shortcut. On the other hand, the sage-to-be realm was to cultivate step by step. As time passed, one's cultivation base would become stronger and stronger, and one's combat strength would become unimaginably terrifying. The so-called way of severing three's corpse was the way to become a sage. It could not completely measure one's cultivation base and combat strength. After all, not every sage-to-be in this world would cultivate the way of severing three's corpse. Take Sage Nuwa for example. Back then, she was just an ordinary sage-to-be. However, in the end, with the help of the merit of mending the heavens and creating man and the primordial purple chi, she managed to step into the sage realm from an ordinary sage-to-be. For example, even though Chi Yu had a sage-to-be who could sever Tu's corpse, he was still far from being comparable to the two heavenly emperors of the ancient demon court. That was because the two heavenly emperors had existed for countless years. Regardless of cultivation base or combat strength, they were already at the pinnacle. They were only a step away from becoming a sage. However, they could not take that step. That was because other than the three ways of becoming a sage, no one could rely on their cultivation base to step into the sage realm. This was the tragedy of being a sage realm. In the past, Sun Wukong had cultivated the way of severing three's corpse to become a sage because he did not want to be a sage-to-be. However, Yi Xian's appearance made him realize that this path was wrong. That was why he destroyed the way of severing Three's corpse to become a sage. However, Sun Wukong's cultivation base did not decrease. That was because he only destroyed the way of becoming a sage, not his own cultivation base. As Sun Wukong slowly explained, Yi Xian finally understood that the 3 ways of becoming a sage were only keys that could open the door to the sage realm. They did not represent one's cultivation base and combat strength. As Sun Wukong slowly explained, Yi Xian finally understood what the sage-to-be realm was. Chapter 685. Brother, I need to go into seclusion for a while. I hope you can protect the celestial court for me during this time, Yi Xian said solemnly. Brother, don't worry about it. With me in the celestial court, I don't think anyone would dare to act presumptuously in the celestial court. Goku nodded in agreement. They toasted each other and drank until half a day had passed before Goku left the celestial emperor's palace. Yi Xian had already instructed Goku not to let anyone disturb his seclusion without his permission. Inside the celestial emperor's palace, Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the void with his gray-white hair hanging behind his head. He slowly raised his hand and ripples bloomed in the void as 2 objects appeared in front of him. The mysterious little cauldron had split into 2 and was currently floating in the air. It didn't emit the slightest bit of an unusual aura. However, Yi Xian's eyes were extremely serious, because what he was about to do next was extremely important to him. Buzz! The Bronze Celestial Sutra rippled out and its pages flipped rapidly. When the Bronze Celestial Sutra appeared, the mysterious small cauldron that had split into 2 underwent a miraculous change. The 2 small cauldrons glowed with a milky white halo. However, this light was not dazzling to the eyes, but it made people feel as if their souls were about to be sucked into it and gave people a sense of dizziness. Buzz! A buzzing sound was heard as the 2 small cauldrons gradually merged together in the void until a dazzling white light illuminated the entire celestial emperor's palace. A white jade cauldron also appeared in the void. Chi! Suddenly, before Yi Xian could react, the small cauldron turned into a white light and shot toward the Bronze Celestial Sutra. As the pages of the Bronze Celestial Sutra flipped rapidly, the mysterious small cauldron instantly merged with the Bronze Celestial Sutra. Just as I thought. Yi Xian roared with a trembling voice. He waved his hand and took the Bronze Immortal Sutra into his hand. He looked at the Bronze Immortal Sutra and saw a mysterious small cauldron appearing on a blank page. It was currently emitting a faint light, giving off an extremely mysterious feeling. In the past, Yi Xian had obtained a small furnace, allowing him to learn the Tribulation Transcender transformation from it. Today, what kind of pleasant surprise would this second small furnace bring him? Today's conversation with Sun Wukong made Yi Xian's heart heavy. Although he was a half-step sage-to-be, compared to the 2 celestial emperors of the ancient demon court, he was still lacking. Moreover, Yi Xian had killed tens of thousands of people from the Wu tribe. He had long become an enemy of the Wu tribe. When the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery were born, they would definitely seek him for revenge. Therefore, Yi Xian had to improve his cultivation in the shortest time possible to deal with the enemies from all sides in the future. Let me see what kind of pleasant surprise you will bring me. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. He kept calming himself down. After a dozen breaths, he calmed down and slowly pressed his palm on the Bronze Immortal Sutra. Roar! Suddenly, a roar that could shatter the heavens was heard. The Bronze Immortal Sutra shook violently. Chaotic divine runes rose from the Bronze Immortal Sutra and formed a strange creature. This creature had the head of a dragon and the body of a tiger. Its eyes were scarlet and its limbs were covered with sharp blades. There was also an extremely terrifying evil aura rising from its body. Obviously, the roar came from this monster. Roar! It was unknown what kind of creature this monster was. It roared angrily. Although its body was illusory and formed from chaotic divine runes, it was releasing an extremely shocking aura. Chi. The monster moved. It brought with it an extremely fierce and boundless aura into Yi Xian's forehead. This also made Yi Xian's eyes glaze over. He fell from the void and crashed heavily on the ground. Ugh! A painful groan came from Yi Xian's mouth. A black flame suddenly burned around him and instantly engulfed him. In the black flame, Yi Xian's face was extremely distorted. Traces of blood constantly flowed out from all parts of his body. However, the strange thing was that the blood was not evaporated by the black flame. Instead, it drew an extremely complicated pattern that spread across Yi Xian's body. It was as if it was an extremely mysterious array. In the Heavenly Emperor's palace, Yi Xian's painful groan gradually faded away. However, the black flame became more terrifying. The blood-red array pattern completely covered him. This situation lasted for 3 years. No one knew whether Yi Xian was alive or dead. Another 3 years passed. The black flame gradually faded. The blood-red array pattern continued to fuse into Yi Xian's body. When the black flame completely disappeared, Yi Xian finally opened his eyes. Wang! Suddenly, it was as if the 9 heavens and rivers were in chaos, as if time and space were inverting. Yi Xian's eyes were spinning, and his pupils were pitch black to the extreme, as if everything in the world was about to be buried in his eyes under his gaze. Yi Xian sat cross-legged as he formed a mysterious incantation with both hands. Strands of black flames suddenly appeared, and blood-colored lines interweaved behind him, converging into an extremely mysterious array pattern. Tribulation Transcender Devour. Suddenly, Yi Xian roared. The black flame burned to the extreme. The blood-red array pattern hummed and rotated. It directly made the entire Heavenly Emperor's palace become extremely illusory. This strange scene was too shocking. Whoosh! A stream of turbid air gushed out of Yi Xian's mouth, and an explosion came from the other side of the void. The blood-red array pattern behind him collapsed and disappeared. The black flame burning around his body strangely disappeared, as if it had never appeared. Yi Xian clenched his fists and roared, "Tribulation Transcenders Devour. It's so powerful that it makes me tremble. How can there be such a technique in this world?" His body and mind trembled to the extreme. Tribulation Transcenders Devour. This was the surprise that the second small cauldron brought to Yi Xian. When Yi Xian found out about the use of Tribulation Transcenders Devour, even if he was someone who wouldn't be shocked even if the sky collapsed, he still couldn't control himself. What was Tribulation Transcenders Devour? Tribulation Transcenders Devour was different from the Tribulation Transcender Transformation. The Tribulation Transcender Transformation increased Yi Xian's realm, but this realm could only be under the Sage Realm. When Yi Xian stepped into the Sage Realm, the Tribulation Transcender Transformation would have no effect on him. However, Tribulation Transcenders Devour was different. This was an extremely heaven-defying technique. It could be said to be an extremely terrifying technique. It was similar to the Tribulation Transcender technique, but it was also different. The Tribulation Transcender technique was to devour the cultivation of others to improve oneself. Tribulation Transcenders Devour was also to devour. However, what it devoured was not the cultivation of others or their cultivation, but their innate magical ability. What was an innate magical ability? For example, Kang Xian was the first 5-colored peacock since the creation of the world. His innate magical ability was the 5-colored divine light. If Yi Xian devoured Kang Xian, he would be able to obtain his innate magical ability, the 5-colored divine light. Of course, Kang Xian was Yi Xian's close friend, so he naturally wouldn't covet his 5-colored divine light. However, from this, one could see how terrifying and heaven-defying the Tribulation Transcenders Devour was. Some people might ask, but devouring the innate magical ability of others isn't a big deal, so how can it be called a heaven-defying technique? Chapter 686. In fact, the reason was very simple. One had to know that in this world, those who possessed innate divine abilities were by no means mediocre, they were all extremely terrifying existences. Yi Xian once had a doubt. The person he suspected to be from the future had crossed the river of time and arrived in the present world. However, Yi Xian was very clear that he had never dabbled in the power of spacetime, nor had he cultivated any spacetime techniques. But today, when he obtained the Tribulation Transcender's Devour, he finally understood. Among the 12 ancient witches, Dijiang was the ancestral witch of space, and his innate divine ability was the power of space. The Candle Dragon was the ancestral witch of time, and his innate divine ability was the power of time. If Yi Xian could devour these two ancestral witches, then he would be able to obtain their innate divine abilities at the same time and take the power of time and space for himself. Moreover, it wasn't just the innate divine abilities of the two ancestral witches. Take a look at the Bell of Primal Chaos in the hands of Donghuang Tai. It was his innate divine ability, and if Yi Xian could devour Donghuang Tai, he would be able to control the Bell of Primal Chaos. By analogy, Yi Xian could devour the innate divine ability of anyone who possessed it and take it for himself. However, there was no invincible technique in this world. Even though the Tribulation Transcender's Devour was extremely terrifying, the prerequisite was that the enemy had to be killed before it could be devoured. However, Yi Xian was already satisfied. With the Tribulation Transcender's Devour in hand, he now had an extremely terrifying method, and he wouldn't need to fear any enemies in the future. Inside the Heavenly Emperor's palace, Yi Xian sorted out his thoughts and constantly thought about his future path. It wasn't until 7 days and 7 nights had passed that Yi Xian walked out of the Heavenly Emperor's palace. At the same time, outside the 33rd layer of heaven, Nuwa Palace, thousands of strands of auspicious qi and holy light permeated the air. Strands of Tao laws were born in the void before vanishing without a trace. This made the entire Nuwa Palace appear even more solemn and dignified. Sage Nuwa sat cross-legged in the air with a woman accompanying her. It was Shuefenga, the former Shueji. It was clear that she had officially become Her Highness Nuwa's disciple. At this moment, she was standing respectfully beside Her Highness Nuwa. Her eyes were filled with surprise as she looked down. Donghuang Tai and Emperor Jun were standing in the palace of Nuwa. They were talking to Nuwa. Apparently, they were both from the untainted land and knew Nuwa before she became a sage. Her Highness Nuwa, although you are a sage and are not involved in the karma of the 3 realms, you are also a member of the demon tribe. Now that Emperor Jun and I have reappeared in the 3 realms, I hope that you can help us on account of the fact that we are both members of the demon tribe, Donghuang Tai said softly. In the past, Ancestor Hung Jun had decreed that sages are not to be born. You'd better go back. Nuwa's voice was very calm, without the slightest ripple, but the rejection in her words was very obvious. Ha! Suddenly, Emperor Jun laughed wildly and looked directly at Nuwa. His posture was slightly unreasonable. This made Nuwa frown, but she did not say anything. Her Highness is a sage. We naturally do not dare to force you, nor do we have the ability to force you. But I wonder if you still remember that in the past, when Zhurong and Gonggang fought and knocked down Mount Buzhou, the water from the outer sky poured into the untainted land. It was Her Highness who mended the sky with the 5-colored godly stone and saved the untainted land, Emperor Jun said coldly. What are you trying to say? Nuwa's expression changed slightly, and the breath around her began to become chaotic. Apparently, Emperor Jun's words could change her mood. There must be something unknown about it. Her Highness, do you still remember that there were no human tribe in the untainted land in the past? It was you who created the human tribe. However, the human tribe was born weak. If Her Highness had not begged us to protect the human tribe, I'm afraid that the human tribe would have been extinct in the untainted land, not to mention become the protagonist of today's heaven and earth, right? Emperor Jun sneered. Are you threatening me? Nuwa suddenly said coldly, and an extremely terrifying holy aura spread out. Apparently, she was really angry because of Emperor Jun's words. Unfortunately, the two celestial emperors were not afraid of Nua's anger, as if they knew that Nua would not attack them. Sure enough, although Nua was extremely angry, she did not attack them. The holy aura she released dissipated in an instant, and she became silent. The five-colored celestial stone is a wonder of heaven and earth. There are only a few of them in the world. We gave it to Her Highness, so that Her Highness could obtain the merit of heaven and earth. The human tribe was weak, and the demon tribe protected them. We gave the human tribe a place to live for Her Highness's sake. We also issued a strict order not to kill the human tribe, and gave them a pure land so that they would not be killed. Emperor Jun said bluntly, without any concealment. He was slowly recounting the past. Mending the heavens and creating the human tribe, Her Highness, you are the pride of the demon tribe. Although we can't enter the sage realm in our lifetime, we have no regrets as long as we have Her Highness, Dong Huang Tai said calmly. Silence, silence, extreme silence. Their conversation caused the entire Nua's Dao Palace to be deathly silent to the extreme, and Nua was even silent. Obviously, they weren't lying at all. Yes, if you didn't give me the five-colored celestial stone, I wouldn't have been able to complete the merit of heaven and earth. If you didn't help me protect the newborn human tribe in the untainted land, the human tribe would have been annihilated in the untainted land. My position as a saint is all thanks to you. Nua stood up from the void and solemnly bowed to the two. However, the two slightly moved away and did not accept Nua's saint bow. You don't have to do this, Her Highness. You are the heaven-ordaining saint. Even without our help, you have a place in the 6 great sages. However, the ancient demon court has reappeared in the world today. Although you are a saint, you are also a member of the demon tribe. Today, we have no other intentions. We just want to use Her Highness's name to reunite the billions of demon tribes. We also hope that Her Highness can help us on account of the fact that we are all members of the demon tribe and let the demon tribe rise again in the world. Dong Huang Tai and Emperor Jun bowed 3 times to Nua. Obviously, this was the purpose of their visit. Nua, the saint of the 3 realms. As long as she could issue a decree, the billions of demon tribes scattered in the 3 realms would reunite under the ancient demon court. This was extremely important to the two. This. Nua frowned, and there was great hesitation in her eyes. She really wanted to refuse the two, because if she issued a decree, she would also be involved in the great tribulation of heaven and earth. However, Nua could not refuse, because to a large extent, her merit of mending heaven and creating human beings was due to the help of the two, which allowed her to become a saint. This was the karma of becoming a saint, and also the favor she owed in the past. Today, the two were here to ask her for this favor. She could not refuse at all, because the favor of becoming a saint had to be repaid by her. Even a saint could not avoid karma. If she really refused, her saint heart would be unstable and eventually collapse, and she would face the end of being annihilated. A saint's heart was eternal and immortal, but the power of karma could not be violated even by a saint. This was the law of the heavens. Not to mention Nua, even Dao ancestor Hung Jun, who had integrated with the Dao, did not dare to touch the power of karma. Okay, I promise you. After 3 short breaths, Nua nodded slowly. She calmed down again and sat cross-legged in the void, but her eyes were slightly closed and she did not say anything. This made Dong Huang Tai and Emperor Jun look at each other. They nodded and bowed to Nua, then turned and left Nua Palace. Chapter 687. Nua Palace. Thousands of streams of auspicious air rippled outwards, causing the space to distort slightly. A formless, oppressive atmosphere grew, making it hard for people to breathe. Nua frowned, and the aura around her became extremely chaotic. Clearly, the request of the 2 celestial emperors made her feel extremely uneasy. She originally wanted to refuse, but in the end, she couldn't. In the past, Tao ancestor Hung Jun had given a strict order that saints were not to be born, and they were not to interfere in the affairs of the three realms. But now, she was going to be the first to go against Tao ancestor Hung Jun. Although she didn't want to do so, she had no other choice. The favor of becoming a saint must be returned. Nuwa deeply understood this principle. She had no choice but to agree to the two celestial emperors' request. This could be considered as returning the favor of the past. To reunite billions of demons and recreate the glory of the ancient demon court, Nuwa wanted to personally issue a decree to announce the return of the ancient demon court to the three realms. This matter seemed simple, but it also meant that Nuwa was firmly tied to the demon race's war chariot. In the future, there would be too many troubles. One must know that the ancient demon court and the shaman tribe were mortal enemies. Just this point alone was enough to give Nuwa a headache. If the great shaman tribe tribulation of the past were to happen again, she would probably be implicated this time. Master, you are a high and mighty saint. You can completely reject the two celestial emperors. Why do you want to create trouble for yourself and get involved with the demon race? Xuefengge had cultivated with Nuwa for tens of thousands of years. She had long been ranked among the Daluo Jingxian, and Nuwa doted on her endlessly. This made Xuefengge probe. Fengge, when you become a quasi-saint in the future, you will understand that the cycle of karma is the principle of heaven and earth. Although I am a saint, I still have to follow the path of karma. Naturally, I can't reject them. Nuwa sighed softly. But master, have you forgotten? There's already a celestial court in the three realms. If you were to personally gather the billions of demons for the ancient Fey court, then which of the two celestial courts would be the orthodox? Master, you should know that Sister Xian Nv has married into the celestial court and is the queen mother. Although Yi Tiandi is not as powerful as the two demonic emperors, he has the support of the Tongtian. This is a complicated relationship. Not waiting for Xuefengge to finish, Queen Nuwa frowned. This caused Xuefengge to stop talking. Clearly, how could Queen Nuwa not know the importance of this matter? Fengge, you're right, but there are some things that Master can't do anything about. This time, I've helped the two of them, so from now on, Master and the two of them are even. Her Highness Nuwa sighed. But Xuefengge's face changed slightly. Just as she was about to speak up to dissuade Queen Nuwa had already disappeared into the void. Xuefengge didn't even have the chance to do so. Fengge, you can focus on your cultivation in the Nuwa Palace. Master will make a trip to the roaming Jade Palace. Queen Nuwa had already left, but her voice was still reverberating in Xuefengge's ears. Following the departure of Queen Nuwa, Xuefengge's brows furrowed tightly. A sharp glint flashed across her eyes. Both her hands conjured a mysterious hand seal as she sat cross-legged within the Nuwa Palace. It was as though she was trying to contact some mysterious person. 33 Heavens of the Celestial Court. There were hundreds of things waiting to be done as the sun and moon alternated. The Celestial Court that was destroyed by De was now brand new. The numinous Sky Hall of the Bullfighting Palace was rebuilt as well. The Celestial Court had regained its former order. Numinous Sky Hall. Yi Xian sat on the throne of the Heavenly Emperor while the Empyrean Fairy sat on the Phoenix throne. Below the both of them were the members of the Celestial Court. Everyone who could appear in the numinous Sky Hall was someone who held the authority of the Celestial Court. Most of them were immortals of the Jia sect. The rest were the demon kings. Ever since Yi Xian had obtained the position of the Heavenly Emperor, he had indeed fulfilled his promise. Not only did he allow the immortals of the Jia sect to hold the authority of the Celestial Court, there were even immortals of the Jia sect teaching the Tao in the 4 continents of the Earth immortal world. They were already showing signs of becoming the #1 sect in the 3 realms. The Chan sect was completely suppressed by Yi Xian. Many of the orthodoxies of the Chan sect were destroyed, and Yi Xian was one of them. It could be said that the Chan sect had suffered a disastrous decline and was struggling at death's door. If it were not for the fact that the Chan sect was founded by Yuanzhi Tianzuan, it would have disappeared from the world long ago. The Jia sect was thriving, and tens of thousands of immortals came to court. Everything was developing in a good direction, and the immortals of the Jia sect were recruiting disciples. After hundreds of thousands of years, the Jia sect would definitely be able to regain its former glory. Your Majesty, you personally attacked the Wu tribe and killed De Yi, the culprit. You have restored the dignity of the celestial court. However, the Wu tribe is not to be trifled with. What's your next decision, Your Majesty? Shen Gongbao bowed and said. The Wu tribe has the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery. Except for the sages who can subdue them, almost no one in the world dares to be their enemy. This time, the celestial court and the Wu tribe will not rest until one of us is dead. I'm afraid things will not end so simply. The goddess of golden spirit echoed. Have you too forgotten that the Wu tribe has the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery? But we have not only the celestial emperor behind us, but also the 3 pure ones, Tong Tian, and the master of goddess Xian Nyu is Nuwa. If the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery really invade us, I'm afraid the 2 sages will not sit back and do nothing. Rakimo said in a low voice. At this time, he also bowed to Yi Xian and said, it's just that in addition to the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery, there are 12 ancient sorcery in the Wu tribe. Qi Yu is only one of them. If you are not in the celestial court, I'm afraid, Rakimo paused, but he did not say anything. Everyone already understood what he meant. Obviously, the celestial court did not have a sage to be in charge at the moment. If the ancient sorcery of the Wu tribe attacked the celestial court, they would definitely bring a great disaster to the celestial court again. As Rakmo's words echoed in the Lingshao Hall, the other immortals nodded slowly. Everyone had a serious look in their eyes. Although they knew that the 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery had not been born, the ancient sorcery of the Wu tribe was not to be trifled with. They were afraid that there would be another dispute in the future. On the throne of the celestial emperor, Yi Xian looked calm. He naturally knew what the immortals were thinking, and the celestial court was indeed facing a great problem. Sage to be. There was no sage to be in the celestial court. This was a great problem, and it was also an urgent matter for Yi Xian. If he was not in the celestial court, how could the celestial court resist another sage to be? Heaven, earth, and the 3 realms were vast. Among the 3 realms of heaven, earth, and man, the most terrifying orthodoxies were not the Chan school and Jia school, but 3 orthodoxies. Rather than orthodoxies, it was better to call them ethnic groups. Needless to say, the Wu tribe bloodline. The 12 ancient ancestors of sorcery were transformed from Pangu's blood essence, and the Wu tribe claimed to be the descendants of Pangu. Every member of the Wu tribe had extremely terrifying combat strength. The ancient demon court had 2 celestial emperors, and the ancient demons were the core of the demon race. This was the second great orthodoxy. The last orthodoxy was the underworld. The ghost emperors of 5 directions, the Yama kings of the 10 halls, the civil and military judges, the black and white impermanents, and the ox head and horse face. This seemed to be the normal structure of the underworld, but one should not forget that the underworld controlled the 6 paths of reincarnation, and also had the river of forgetfulness and the underworld. There were hundreds of millions of ghost soldiers and ghost generals, among which there were countless ghost immortals and daluo. There were also many sage-to-be realm experts. Chapter 688. There was the Nether River Patriarch in the Nether Blood Sea, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva in the 18 levels of hell, and Mengpa on the Bridge of Helplessness. No one knew their cultivation bases. The Emperor of Fengdu sat in the center and ruled the 5 ghostly regions. How could he be an ordinary person? These 3 orthodoxies all had one thing in common, which was that they all had quasi-saints. On the other hand, the celestial court did not have a single quasi-saint. Sun Wukong was only Yi Xian's close friend, so it was impossible for him to become a member of the celestial court. At this moment, a difficult problem was placed in front of Yi Xian. This was also the greatest hidden danger of the Celestial Court, and it had to be solved by him, the Celestial Emperor. The Lingshao Hall was silent. The immortals all focused their eyes on Yi Xian. No one dared to make a sound, obviously afraid of disturbing Yi Xian. Quasi-saint? Where could he find a quasi-saint to sit in the Celestial Court? What kind of joke was this? How could a quasi-saint be restrained by others? This was simply a huge problem. Yi Xian constantly overturned all kinds of ideas in his mind, and his brows were tightly knitted together. The Celestial Court left behind by the Jade Emperor was too weak. Although it had undergone earth-shattering changes after his vigorous transformation, how could he find a quasi-saint? There had never been a quasi-saint in the Celestial Court. Suddenly, Yi Xian's eyes widened. A light flashed across his mind, and a person appeared in his mind. How could I forget him? Isn't he a member of the Celestial Court? With him sitting in the Celestial Court, even if the 12 ancient witches really came, they would have to hold back. Yi Xian's face lit up, and his brows instantly relaxed. I've already made my decision. You don't need to discuss it anymore. Yi Xian returned from his thoughts, and his voice echoed in the Lingshao Hall. Then, he stood up from the Emperor's throne, turned into a ray of light, and disappeared. Yi Xian's sudden departure stunned the immortals. Although they did not know where Yi Xian had gone, he must have thought of something. 33rd Heaven, Tushita Palace. Yi Xian paced around Tushita Palace with his hands behind his back. A jade tablet quietly appeared in his hand. A trace of hesitation appeared on his face, but he still resolutely crushed the jade tablet. Wang! The jade tablet shattered, and ripples appeared in the void. A water screen mirror image condensed. In the mirror, there was an old Taoist with white hair and beard sitting cross-legged in the middle of the bamboo forest. This old Taoist had a sage-like demeanor and a benevolent countenance. He wore a purple-gold bagua robe and was slowly inhaling and exhaling as if he was immersed in cultivation. Old Lord. Yi Xian smiled. Taishang Lao Jun. Lao Tzu was transformed from the good corpse and replaced Sage Lao Tzu to guard the Celestial Court. However, Yi Xian killed the Jade Emperor in the past and forced Taishang Lao Jun out of the Celestial Court. Until today, the two of them met again through the water screen. Yi Xian, have you fulfilled the promise from back then? In the mirror image, Taishang Lao Jun slowly opened his eyes and looked at Yi Xian through the mirror image. His eyes were very calm, as if he had already expected that the two of them would meet again one day. The walls have ears. I'll wait for you in Tushita Palace. Yi Xian only said a simple sentence and directly waved the water screen mirror image away. With him in charge of the Celestial Court again, all the enemies will be extremely afraid. Yi Xian smiled strangely and muttered to himself. Taishang Lao Jun was transformed from the good corpse of Sage Lao Tzu. His cultivation was only at the peak of zenith heaven. However, this was not his true cultivation, but the result of Taishang Lao Jun's efforts to suppress it. This was because Taishang Lao Jun had already developed an independent consciousness and had always wanted to get rid of Sage Lao Tzu's control. However, if he entered the sage to be, Lao Tzu would definitely know that he had developed an independent consciousness, which would cause him to suffer a great calamity. In the past, Yi Xian forced him to leave the Celestial Court for 3 reasons. First, Yi Xian threatened him with this matter. Second, Yi Xian's cultivation was too weak to control this person. Third, the two of them made a secret deal. The deal was very simple. Yi Xian had to completely cut off the connection between Taishang Lao Jun and Sage Lao Tzu, so that he could truly become an independent individual. Today, Yi Xian's cultivation had entered the half-step to sage to be and could complete the deal between the two. This was because he could already use the heaven-destroying halberd and could cut through anything. Naturally, it was easy to cut off the connection between Lao Tzu and Taishang Lao Jun. Without sage Lao Tzu's restraint, Taisheng Laojun could directly enter the sage-to-be without suppressing his cultivation and truly become an independent individual. He would no longer have any connection with sage Lao Tzu. Of course, cutting off the connection between Taisheng Laojun and sage Lao Tzu would definitely alert Lao Tzu. If Lao Tzu personally came to the celestial court and discovered that Taisheng Laojun was no longer under his control, there would definitely be a great change. However, sages could not be born. This was the rule set by Tao ancestor Hengjun. Moreover, the great calamity of heaven and earth had already begun. It was likely that Lao Tzu would not be born. Otherwise, he would definitely be involved in this great calamity of heaven and earth. Yi Xian was betting, and so was Taisheng Laojun. Yi Xian was betting that Taisheng Laojun would be used by him, while Taisheng Laojun was betting that he would not be willing to be controlled by a sage. The two of them hit it off. It could be said that they were playing with fire. 7 days later, a person was welcomed into Tushita Palace. It was the original owner of this place, Taisheng Laojun. No one knew what happened in Tushita Palace on this day. The only thing they knew was that the heavens and earth were extremely distorted. A wisp of darkness covered Tushita Palace, and miserable cries could be heard from private messages. 3 years had passed. The boundless darkness was dispersing, and the door of Tushita Palace opened. 2 figures walked out of Tushita Palace. Yi Xian was dressed in black. His hair was draped behind his head, and his face was somewhat pale. Evidently, he had used up a lot of his cultivation to cut off the connection between Taisheng Laojun and Lao Tzu. After all, Yi Xian did not dare to be the slightest bit careless when it concerned a sage. Taisheng Laojun's face was ruddy, and his eyes were filled with excitement. At this moment, he was bowing to Yi Xian. "Don't worry, Celestial Emperor. This old man will become a sage-to-be in less than 1,000 years. As long as this old man is in the celestial court, no one can be presumptuous here." Taisheng Laojun solemnly promised. "Good." Yi Xian nodded. His body suddenly turned illusory, and he turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the distance. Taisheng Laojun returned to Tushita Palace. As the palace door closed, he officially entered a state of seclusion. Taisheng Laojun was transformed from Lao Tzu's good corpse. His foundation was unimaginably terrifying. He could have become a sage-to-be long ago, but he had been suppressing it for endless time. Now that Yi Xian had helped him cut off the connection between him and Lao Tzu, he could finally step into the sage-to-be without worry. Perhaps some people would ask why Taisheng Laojun was so bold. Was he not afraid that Lao Tzu would sense it and personally come to the celestial court to kill him? The answer was no. This was because Taisheng Laojun had a great ambition, and it was the biggest secret in his heart. He had never told anyone about this secret, and it was even more impossible for him to tell Yi Xian. This secret was to become a sage-to-be. That's right, to become a sage-to-be. Becoming a sage-to-be was only the first step. Taisheng Laojun's goal was to become the 7th sage-to-be. This was also the reason why he dared to take the risk and cut off the connection with Lao Tzu. As Lao Tzu's good corpse, he had all of Lao Tzu's memories. This was his strongest foundation. Naturally, he wanted to become the 7th sage-to-be. He seemed to be guarding the celestial court for Yi Xian, but his real goal was to prepare for becoming a sage-to-be. This was because there were 2 major conditions to become a sage-to-be. One was the merit of heaven and earth, and the other was the Hongmeng immortal vapor. He did not know where the Hongmeng immortal vapor was, but he knew how to obtain the merit of heaven. The condition to obtain the merit of heaven was that it was related to the 33rd celestial court. Of course, Yi Xian did not know what Taisheng Laojun was thinking. If Yi Xian knew, Yi Xian would definitely re-evaluate Taisheng Laojun. He did not expect him to be so ambitious. Chapter 689. Bullfighting Palace. The palace had no roof and the sky was filled with stars. Strands of starlight cascaded down and illuminated Yi Xian's figure, giving him a mysterious and leisurely aura. Taisheng Laojun had returned to the Tushita Palace. This was also a risky move by Yi Xian because Taisheng Laojun was formed by Lao Tzu's good corpse. It would make all his enemies hesitate to attack him. The head of the three clear ones, Sage Lao Tzu, was also known as Taisheng Dao Tianzuan. Yi Xian realized that he was playing with fire. However, there was no turning back. He could only continue walking down this path until he became a quasi-sage. Suddenly, Yi Xian's eyes widened and his hands quickly formed a seal. Ripples appeared in the void and an illusory figure appeared in front of him. It was Xuefengge from the Nuwa Palace. Martial uncle. What happened? Yi Xian frowned. One had to know that the two of them had never used this method of communication. Yi Xian had even told Xuefengge in the past that unless something big happened, she should never use this method to contact him. If Nuwa found out, Xuefengge would definitely be consigned to eternal damnation. However, Xuefengge had taken the initiative to contact him. Obviously, something big had happened. Otherwise, she wouldn't have risked being discovered by Nuwa to contact him. Martial uncle, something big has happened. Xuefengge quickly told him about the two heavenly emperors coming to the Nuwa Palace. It took her half an hour to finish her narration. Yi Xian's aura turned gloomy and he became silent. Billions of demons have gathered and the ancient demon court has reappeared. Yi Xian muttered to himself. His voice became extremely heavy and revealed a hint of depression. Nuwa made a move. Yi Xian kept pacing around the bullfighting palace. His face was gloomy like water, and the aura around his body was extremely sinister. He had sunk into an indescribable irritation. If one were to observe carefully, they would notice that Yi Xian's eyes had a sense of imminent danger. Yi Xian had long known about the birth of the ancient demon court. The cultivation of the two celestial emperors was naturally terrifying, and they even had the ancient demons by their side. This was an extremely terrifying force. However, what truly made Yi Xian's heart heavy was not the ancient demon court, but Saint Nuwa's attack. This already made Yi Xian feel extremely anxious. The reason was simple. In the past, Yi Xian had thought that the 6 sages wouldn't emerge into the world because Dao ancestor Hung Jun had issued a strict order after the War of the Gods, and he didn't allow the sages to emerge into the world and interfere in the strife of the 3 dimensions. But now, Nuwa was the first to break this rule. This also meant that the sages had already intervened in the 3 dimensions. Based on this, the other 5 sages would definitely not remain indifferent. Moreover, with the support of Saint Nuwa, the demons of the 3 dimensions would completely gather under the ancient demon court. This was an extremely heavy blow to Yi Xian. As the saying goes, there can be no 2 suns in the sky, and no 2 masters in the people. There could only be one celestial court in this world. If the ancient demon court wanted to clear its name, the first thing they would deal with would probably be his 33rd celestial court. Yi Xian was an extremely proud person, but he wasn't an arrogant person. He knew that his current cultivation was still a distance away from the 2 celestial emperors. Even if he used the Tribulation Transcender transformation, he wouldn't be their match. Moreover, don't forget that apart from the 2 celestial emperors, the ancient demon court had tens of thousands of demons. The weakest among them was Daluo Jingxian, and there were many quasi-sages among them. The 33rd celestial court couldn't resist them at all. Xue Ji, did Nuwa go to the Green Palace to see Tang Tian? Yi Xian asked solemnly. Yes, Nuwa told me personally, Xue Ji said worriedly in Nuwa's palace. This is bad. Yi Xian said coldly, his eyes flickering with murderous intent. Obviously, Nuwa went to see Tang Tian because of the 33rd celestial court. After all, the celestial court was supported by Tang Tian, and his position as celestial emperor was also recognized by Tang Tian. Martial uncle, what can I do for you? In Yua's palace, although Shuefengge couldn't see Yi Xian, she could feel the heaviness in Yi Xian's heart. This made her frown, and she hoped that she could help Yi Xian. Delay, you must delay. Delay Yua's decree. Martial uncle needs time. In Bullfighting Palace, Yi Xian said solemnly. He had no other choice now. He could only hope that Xue Ji could delay Yua's decree. During this time, he had to think of a way to break it. Martial uncle, don't worry. No matter what, Xue Ji will delay Yua's decree, Shuefengge said solemnly. Xue Ji, you must remember to delay as long as you can. If you can't, you must take care of yourself. Don't let Yua discover your identity, Yi Xian reminded. Yes, martial uncle. The image in the void dissipated, and the connection between the two was cut off. Only Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes were extremely deep, and no one knew what he was thinking. Tong Tian, are you really going to give up on the celestial court, and give up on me? Suddenly, Yi Xian said gloomily. He looked up at the 33rd heaven, and a gloomy look flashed across his eyes. Outside the 33rd heaven, in Roaming Jade Palace. Senior brother, what do you think of my suggestion? Yua asked calmly. She was saying something to Tong Tian. Junior sister, you want the disciples of the Jia sect to withdraw from the celestial court. This is asking me to give up on Yi Xian. Tongtian's face was gloomy, and his tone was even more dissatisfied. Obviously, he couldn't accept Yua's suggestion at all. This was because Yi Xian was the person who made the Jia sect prosper. If he gave up on Yi Xian, wouldn't the Jia sect, which had just shown signs of prosperity, fall once again? Senior brother, have you ever thought that the ancient demon court is the orthodox celestial court? The celestial court in this world is just a replica of the ancient demon court, and the Eastern Emperor Tai and Di Jun are the leaders of the demon race. How can Yi Xian be a match for the ancient demon court? Moreover, senior brother, don't forget that there are billions of demons in the three realms. When I issue a decree, these billions of demons will return to the ancient demon court and recreate the grand occasion when the ancient demon court was in charge of the three realms in the past. The 33rd heaven celestial court can only be destroyed by the ancient demon court. What will the disciples of the Jia sect do then? Yua spoke tirelessly, explaining the powerful relationship. Obviously, she wasn't exaggerating, but telling the truth. This. Hearing Yua's words, Tong Tian frowned. Obviously, he also knew that Yua was right. The great witch-demon war of the past was still fresh in his memory. It was simply an unimaginable catastrophe, but it also fully proved the horror of the ancient demon court. The demon race in the three realms was as numerous as the eternal sand. This was an unimaginably terrifying force, not to mention that the Eastern Emperor Tai and Di Jun were figures in the same period as the sages. Although they weren't sages, their cultivation was already at the peak of the sage-to-be, which was definitely not something that Yi Xian could resist at the moment. Did he really have to give up on Yi Xian? A bewildered thought appeared in Tongtian's mind, which also made him hesitate and didn't know what decision to make. Chapter 690. Looking at Tongtian's frown, Yua continued to persuade him, Senior brother, you should know that I owe Saint Cheng a favor in the past. I have to repay this favor, even if I have to go against Teacher Hongjuan's decree. I'm here today for the sake of the Jia school that Senior brother founded. I hope Senior brother will reconsider. Let me think about it. Tong Tian said solemnly. He did not immediately agree to Yua's request. Clearly, he still had hope for Yi Xian. I can guarantee you that when the ancient demon court takes charge of the three realms, the Jia school can still spread its teachings in the three realms. I hope Senior brother will not miss the opportunity. I'll take my leave. Yua stood up and floated away, leaving Tong Tian alone in the green touring palace. He let out a long sigh. Clearly, this was a huge problem for him. If he made the wrong choice, the Jie school that he had founded would collapse. Yi Xian, you really don't have much time left. Tang Tian said solemnly in the Green Touring Palace. An extremely oppressive atmosphere grew in the Green Touring Palace, proving that Tongtian's mood was not calm. After Nuwa left the Green Touring Palace, she did not return to her Dao field directly. Instead, she headed towards the Jade Void Palace. Clearly, she had not only visited Tang Tian when she left the Nuwa Palace, but also Yuanshi Tianzuan, one of the three pure ones. In the bullfighting palace of the 33rd Celestial Court, Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. He was in deep thought with his eyes closed. The surrounding void was extremely distorted, and an extremely oppressive atmosphere grew in the bullfighting palace. Suddenly, Yi Xian opened his eyes. A sanguine light quietly streaked across them, containing a hint of viciousness. Humans can only rely on themselves. If I really rely on Tongtian's protection, I'm afraid I'll suffer a great calamity sooner or later. The 33rd Celestial Court will also be destroyed. Yi Xian said gloomily. Although he did not know what Nuwa and the Tang Tian had talked about, Yi Xian could guess most of it. After all, the ancient demon court had reappeared in the world, and his celestial court was a stumbling block. No matter what I say, it's still because my cultivation isn't high enough. If I can truly become a quasi-saint, I can stop the rise of the ancient demon court. Yi Xian understood himself and dug out the root of the problem. He also suddenly realized in the bullfighting palace that if he could truly step into the quasi-sage realm and display the tribulation transcender transformation, apart from the sages, no one would be his opponent. Quasi-sage. Origin immortal body. Yi Xian murmured coldly. Whether it was the feud with the witch race or the oppression brought to him by the ancient demon court, the root of it was his lack of cultivation. As long as he could step into the quasi-sage realm, he could talk to the witch race and the ancient demon court on equal terms. Celestial Emperor. Suddenly, an anxious voice came from outside the hall. Venus Taibai walked in quickly. Yi Xian frowned and said, "What's the hurry?" Princess Yaoyue secretly went to the mortal world. The old minister apologizes to the celestial emperor. Venus Taibai knelt on the ground, her face full of shame. At this moment, Yi Xian was facing many important matters. Hearing Venus Taibai's words, Yi Xian frowned. How could he have the leisure to care about these trivial matters? Forget it, let her be. It's fine as long as she doesn't cause trouble. You can leave now. Yi Xian was slightly irritated. Yes, this old official will take his leave. Taibai Jinxing hurriedly took his leave. With Venus Taibai's departure, Yi Xian once again thought about how to resist the rise of the ancient demon court. As for Yi Yaoyue secretly going to the mortal world, he could only temporarily put it aside. Eastern Emperor Tai. Di Jun. Demon race? Yi Xian muttered to himself. Suddenly, a light flashed in his eyes. Yi Xian waved his hand and a map appeared in his hand. The Sea of the Northern Underworld. Yi Xian said word by word. His eyes were shining as if he had thought of something. Demon Master Kunpeng, how could I forget him? Yi Xian looked at the map in his hand with an extremely strange expression. This map was obtained by Yi Xian when he destroyed the North Sea Dragon Palace. He also got a message from the North Sea Dragon King that Demon Master Kunpeng had died in the Sea of the Northern Underworld. Demon Master Kunpeng. The Emperor's preceptor of the ancient demon court was the master of all demons. In the ancient demon court, he was on an equal footing with the two celestial emperors. In the Great War of Witches and Demons, it was said that Demon Master Kunpeng fought with the ancestor of witches and finally fell between heaven and earth. However, Yi Xian did not believe this rumor. Because Eastern Emperor Tai and Di Jun were still alive, how could Demon Master Kunpeng die? If Kunpeng is not dead and can be used by me, the ancient demon court will not be an iron bucket. It seems that I have to go to the Sea of the Northern Underworld personally. Yi Xian murmured coldly. An unfathomable look flashed in his eyes as if he was thinking about something. A worthy younger brother. Suddenly, a series of footsteps came from outside the hall. Emperor Ziwei, whom he had not seen for a long time, entered the bullfighting palace. This also made Yi Xian come back from his deep thoughts. Brother. Yi Xian cupped his fists and bowed. Emperor Ziwei had helped him in the past. Although he was now a celestial emperor, the two of them still called each other brothers. A worthy younger brother, it's good that you're fine. Emperor Ziwei patted Yi Xian's shoulder affectionately. Obviously, he also knew that Yi Xian had killed De Yi. This made him feel very comforted. Brother, you don't have to worry. We haven't seen each other in a long time. Today, we must drink to our heart's content. Yi Xian smiled and called for immortal officials to set up a banquet to welcome Emperor Ziwei. A worthy younger brother, you don't have to do this. I'm relieved to know that you're fine. This time, I'm also here to send you an invitation under Master's orders. Emperor Ziwei smiled and handed the golden invitation to Yi Xian. Huh? Immortal Jin Yuan's invitation. Yi Xian's expression froze for a moment. He received the invitation and looked at it. His eyes narrowed slightly. Ginseng Fruit Convention. Yi Xian whispered. That's right. The Ginseng Fruit Convention will be held 30,000 years later. At that time, all the mighty figures of the three realms will participate. A worthy younger brother, don't miss the time. Emperor Ziwei smiled. The Ginseng Fruit Convention of the ancestor of earthly immortals was extremely famous in the three realms. Not only would grand heavenly immortals participate, but pre-saints would also come. It was definitely not something that the Feast of Peaches of Immortality of the Celestial Court could compare to. Brother, don't worry. I'll be there on time. Yi Xian accepted the invitation. On this day, Yi Xian and Emperor Ziwei toasted each other and talked about their brotherhood. When Emperor Ziwei left, Yi Xian stood alone in the bullfighting palace. There was a sense of urgency in his eyes. Before one wave subsided, another wave arose. The Ginseng Fruit Convention was held at such a sensitive time. How could Yi Xian not think about it? No matter what, I have to go to the Dark North Sea first and see if the demon master Kuan Peng is still in the human world. If I can enter the Sage to Be in the next 30,000 years, I won't have to fear any great enemies. Yi Xian tapped the table with his fingers and kept making rhythmic sounds. No matter how many times he said it, Yi Xian understood that only by being strong could a person face all difficulties. Yi Xian had always believed in the iron law that the strong were respected. He was the only one who had entered the Sage to Be. He had a faint premonition that perhaps this trip to the Dark North Sea would be his opportunity to enter the Sage to Be. Chapter 691. Time flew by like a shuttle. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years had passed. Yi Xian did not set off immediately because he still had some matters to deal with in the Celestial Court. Be it the Grand Supreme Elder or the mobilization of the Celestial Court, he had to make sure that nothing went wrong. Only by stabilizing the Celestial Court could he leave with peace of mind. 1,000 years later. An earth-shattering piece of news spread. The ancient demon court had reappeared in the world and would recreate the golden age of the demons in the past. Legend had it that Saint Nuwa was supporting them from behind. However, this rumor was groundless and could not be confirmed. That was not the end. There was another piece of news that caused the three realms to tremble. The Chan school announced to the three realms. The immortals of the Chan school would enter the ancient demon court and officially become its subjects. The deputy sect master of the Chan school, the old man of the South Pole, would become an imperial lord of the ancient demon court. At this moment, he had changed his honorific title and was called the Old Man of the South Pole. When this news spread, the three realms was in an uproar. The entire world was shaken. A huge storm began to brew, causing the people of the three realms to panic. They knew that something terrifying would happen in the future. The disciples of the Chan school and the saint had all joined the ancient demon court. This also proved that it was Yuanshi Tianzuan's attitude. However, don't forget that the disciples of the Jie school were members of the 33rd Heaven's celestial court. The two sects could be said to have a long grudge. This was openly standing on the opposite side of Yi Xian. Moreover, there could only be one celestial court in the world. This time, the appearance of the ancient demon court and the addition of the Chan school undoubtedly proved that the ancient demon court was the orthodox celestial court. There would definitely be a battle between the two celestial courts. When this news spread to the 33rd Heaven's celestial court, the immortals of the celestial court were in a state of panic. However, Yi Xian did not show any abnormalities, as if he had already expected this outcome. In the Lingshao Hall. Heavenly Emperor, the ancient demon court has reappeared in the world. The Chan school has joined in. I'm afraid. Shen Gongbao said with a trembling voice. He wanted to say something but stopped. Not only did Shen Gongbao look worried, but the immortals of the celestial court were also silent. Even the demon kings had complicated expressions on their faces. Obviously, they felt greatly threatened by this news. Moreover, some demon kings had complicated expressions in their eyes. After all, they were demons. If the ancient demon court summoned them, it would be a huge problem whether they should go or not. At this moment, Yi Xian walked down from the emperor's throne. He looked around at the celestial court and seemed to have guessed everyone's thoughts. However, Yi Xian had already expected this outcome and did not say anything. The ancient demon court had dealt Yi Xian a heavy blow. This blow seemed calm, but it had actually shaken the foundation of the celestial court. That was because the ancient demon court was the orthodox demons, and most of his subordinates were demon kings from the lower realm. Only Shen Gongbao and the others were immortals of the Jie school. At this moment, the Chan school had joined the ancient demon court to fight against the rise of the Jie school. Apart from the immortals of the Jie school, the remaining demon kings, except for the sky-devouring toad and the others, were all his trusted aides. If he did not handle it well, there would be a huge change sooner or later. After all, the ancient demon court had reappeared in the world and represented the orthodox demons. They had even fought to recreate the golden age of the demons. How could these demon kings not be moved? Right now, the only thing Yi Xian was gratified about was that Nuwa hadn't issued a decree yet. The billions of demons in the three realms were still watching from the sidelines. It was obvious that Xue Ji had contributed greatly to this. You don't have to worry. It's just the ancient demon court. I have my own decision. Yi Xian spoke calmly without any abnormalities. This also calmed the immortals of the celestial court. Clearly, Yi Xian was as important as a mountain in their hearts and was their spiritual pillar. As long as Yi Xian did not fall, no one would dare to betray him. Immeasurable Heavenly Lord. Suddenly, a voice sounded in the Lingshao Hall. Grand Supreme Elder quietly appeared beside Yi Xian. He was wearing a purple gold 8-trigram robe and was looking at everyone with a smile. Then, he bowed to Yi Xian. Greetings, Celestial Emperor. Such a sudden scene stunned the immortals of the Celestial Court. When they saw Grand Supreme Elder appear, everyone turned into clay puppets and did not recover for a long time. Grand Supreme Elder. Shen Gongbao growled in shock. He looked at Grand Supreme Elder with great shock. He never thought that the legendary figure would appear in the Celestial Court. At this moment, he even bowed to Yi Xian like a subject. Not only Shen Gongbao, but the other immortals and demon kings were the same. They looked at Grand Supreme Elder with great surprise and a deep sense of respect. There were too many legends about Grand Supreme Elder, but the most shocking one was that Grand Supreme Elder was the incarnation of the sage Lao Tzu. How could they not have heard of this legend? From today onwards, Grand Supreme Elder will oversee the Celestial Court. If a great enemy invades, he will be able to suppress them. Yi Xian looked around at the immortals of the celestial court and said calmly. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Shen Gongbao was the first to react. He looked at Yi Xian with surprise and asked, Celestial Emperor, are you leaving the celestial court? Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not answer this question. Instead, he strolled out of the Lingxiao Hall. This made the immortals of the celestial court not dare to ask more. In the bullfighting palace, Yi Xian was dressed in black. A door opened in front of him. It was the door to the lower world. The Empyrean fairy stood beside him and looked at him worriedly. Are you really leaving? The Empyrean fairy bit her lips and asked. I walk the path of cultivation through strength. If I don't become a sage-to-be, I won't be able to fight against many great enemies. I'll have to trouble you while I'm away. Yi Xian stroked the Empyrean fairy's hair bun. Since he returned to the celestial court, the two of them had not been together. Now that he was leaving, the Empyrean fairy felt guilty. Yi Xian, you must remember that I'm your wife. I'll always wait for your return in the celestial court. You must come back alive to see me. The Empyrean fairy suddenly smiled. She gently leaned her head into Yi Xian's arms, but a touch of moisture wet Yi Xian's chest. This made Yi Xian slightly startled, and a complicated look appeared in his eyes. Okay, go quickly. I'll wait for you to come back. Suddenly, the Empyrean fairy pushed Yi Xian away and quickly turned around. She didn't want to look at Yi Xian again, but her face was full of tears. She clearly didn't want Yi Xian to see her cry. Take care. Yi Xian took a deep breath and suddenly entered the door of light. As the door closed with a rumble, Yi Xian also disappeared from the bullfighting palace. With Yi Xian's departure, the Empyrean fairy slowly turned around. Her face was full of tears. She stared blankly at the place where Yi Xian disappeared, and her voice echoed in the bullfighting palace. No matter what happens in the future, I'll always be your wife. You must come back alive to see me. A wisp of emotion, a wisp of hidden bitterness, and even a deep expectation could not express the Empyrean fairy's feelings for Yi Xian. Chapter 692. Earth Immortal Realm, North Sea. The North Sea was vast, and the sky and water were connected. From time to time, monstrous waves would rise, accompanied by the rumbling sound of the waves. However, the cold wind of the world blew past, giving people a bone-piercing chill. If a mortal was here, they would definitely be frozen stiff by the cold wind. The waves were turbulent and the glaciers were visible. The huge waves kept pushing the ice peaks on the surface of the sea, creating a rare scene. Buzz! A divine light appeared on the surface of the sea. The light was not dazzling, but it could not be looked at directly. As the light slowly dissipated, Yi Xian's figure appeared. According to the map, the door to the northern underworld sea should be here. Yi Xian looked around the sea, his eyes moving slightly as if he was sensing something. This was the deepest part of the North Sea. It was bitterly cold all year round. Even fish and prawns could not survive in this part of the sea. Few people set foot in this harsh environment. Yi Xian came here according to the map, but all he saw was glaciers. He did not even see ordinary fish or prawns, let alone the so-called northern underworld sea. A pair of Dharma eyes shone through the void. The indestructible true spirit buzzed and rotated. Yi Xian was calmly sensing the changes in this part of the sea. However, after a long time, he did not find anything different. Impossible, the North Sea Old Dragon King would not dare to lie to me. This map is so important to him, and it has the mark of the Kunpeng on it. It can't be fake. Yi Xian frowned and muttered to himself. However, what puzzled Yi Xian was that he could sense the sea for thousands of miles, but he did not find anything strange. Where was the door to the northern underworld sea? Suddenly, Yi Xian's eyes lit up as if he had thought of something. He looked directly at the sea under his feet. Open. The waves split and the surface of the sea was broken. Yi Xian directly dived into the North Sea, and his body was instantly submerged. Darkness, endless darkness. As Yi Xian continued to dive, the water around him parted. At first, he could still see the beautiful scenery at the bottom of the sea, but as Yi Xian went deeper and deeper into the sea, the surrounding light dimmed until it turned into endless darkness. 30,000 meters, 100,000 meters, 1,000,000 meters, Yi Xian didn't know how deep he had dived, but the water pressure around him was getting more and more terrifying. If it wasn't for his extremely tyrannical body, even Daluo Jingxian would have suffered great injuries after diving so deep into the sea. A full 3 days passed, and a ripple of light flickered on the boundless seabed. This light was extremely dazzling in the pitch-black seabed, and it gave off a feeling of incomparable beauty. Found it. Yi Xian's face lit up with joy. He took a step forward and shot towards the source of the light. Wang! The rippling door flickered slightly. This was a miniature door that only one person could pass through at a time. At this moment, it was emitting bits of green light, and a hint of the vast expanse's aura emanated from the door. Without any hesitation or fear, Yi Xian entered the door and disappeared from the bottom of the North Sea. This was a dusky world. There was no sun, no moon, and no stars in the sky. There was only the boundless black sea and the gray sky. The sea was pitch black and calm, making it impossible to see the end of the sea. It was like a land of death, and there were no so-called living creatures living in it. The sky was gray and covered with dark clouds. From time to time, lightning could be seen flashing in the clouds, and the sound of thunder could be heard. It added a mysterious and terrifying feeling to this place. Wang! Yi Xian took a step forward, causing ripples to appear. Yi Xian quietly appeared in this world. When he saw the scene before him, his brows slightly furrowed. This is the northern underworld sea? Yi Xian whispered in surprise. This scene was different from what he had imagined. He had thought that the northern underworld sea was a paradise, but the world spirit chi here was thin, and it gave people a feeling of death. It was too different from what he had imagined. Rumble. Suddenly, Yi Xian's body was surrounded by chaotic divine light. He was like a golden sun, blooming with boundless light, and illuminating the boundless sea. Then, he walked slowly in the void. Dong, dong, dong. It was as if the war drums of the 9 heavens were beating, as if the heavens were exploding. With every step Yi Xian took, the entire world rumbled and shook, and the surface of the sea that was like stagnant water was even raising monstrous waves. Yi Xian deliberately made such a loud noise because if the Kun Peng was still alive, it would definitely lure him out. However, to Yi Xian's disappointment, the demon master Kun Peng did not appear. It was as if the northern underworld sea was a land of death, and there were no living creatures at all. Demon master, please come out and meet me. Yi Xian stood on the surface of the sea, and huge waves rose behind him. His voice reverberated in all directions, but unfortunately, no one responded. Interesting. Yi Xian smiled. The chaotic divine light slowly dissipated, and there was no longer any aura around him. He walked on the surface of the sea and walked towards the depths of the northern underworld sea. The world was silent, and everything was silent. Yi Xian walked calmly on the surface of the sea. However, with every step he took, he covered a distance of tens of thousands of miles. He only smiled when he saw a small island in front of him. There was an island where not a single blade of grass grew. It was like a dead land. What was surprising was that the shape of the island was like a bird's nest. There was a pitch-black hole that looked like the mouth of a taotai. It gave people a terrifying feeling. No one knew where this place led to. Dong! Yi Xian's feet stomped on the ground, causing the entire island to tremble. He also looked towards the black hole and saw a mottled stone tablet rooted to the side of the hole. 3 large words were engraved on the stone tablet. Kun Peng's nest. Yi Xian paused for a moment as he read out the words on the stone tablet. A trace of a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. The stone tablet was very old, and the words engraved on it were ancient demonic words. However, since Yi Xian entered the Earth Immortal realm, he had studied the languages of various races in addition to cultivation. Naturally, he could recognize the ancient demonic words on the stone tablet. Deliberately mystifying. Let's see what tricks you have up your sleeves. Yi Xian smiled coldly and walked into the Kunpeng's nest. Obviously, he did not believe that the demon master Kunpeng had fallen. He must be in the Kunpeng's nest. Inside the Kunpeng's nest. The path was paved with bluestones, and the walls were mottled. Obviously, it was man-made. There were bright pearls on both sides of the path, and they would not be extinguished even after thousands of years. Yi Xian did not encounter any danger along the way. Occasionally, he would see some white bones scattered on the ground. There were no other strange scenes. These white bones were of different shapes. As Yi Xian went deeper, more and more white bones appeared on the ground. Obviously, in the distant past, many living creatures had explored this place, but without exception, they all died in vain. The white bones paved the path, and they were crystal clear. Immortal demonic light bloomed on the white bones. Obviously, these dead creatures were demon kings and immortals when they were alive. Chapter 693. Yi Xian walked slowly. His senses were extremely sensitive and he could feel that there was a pair of eyes spying on him. However, when he tried to look for them, the owner of the eyes could not find them. It was as if the owner of the eyes had sensed that he had attracted Yi Xian's attention. After 2 hours, a mottled stone door appeared in front of him, allowing Yi Xian to walk to the end of the passageway. The stone door was ancient and weathered. It was engraved with ancient demon characters and a yin-yang taiji diagram. A fish was swimming on the stone door, giving off a mysterious and boundless feeling. Rumble. When Yi Xian stood in front of the stone door, he saw the fish swimming rapidly on the stone door, causing the entire stone door to rumble open. A boundless and vast aura poured out from the stone door. The aura of desolation. Yi Xian muttered to himself as the stone door opened and light shone in all directions. A look of surprise flashed in his eyes as he walked into the stone door. There was a house and a clear pool. A black-clothed, white-haired man stood beside the pool with his hands behind his back. He was looking at the beautiful scene in the pool with his back facing Yi Xian. A black and white fish with a strange shape was swimming in the pool. Some small fish and prawns were eaten by the black and white fish, and when the fish's tail flapped, it caused small splashes to appear in the pool. This is a kun fish, right? Yi Xian walked over and stood beside the black-clothed, white-haired man. He also looked at the pool like a person and his voice was very calm. Right now, he is only a kun fish. When the wind and clouds of the 9 heavens gather, he will grow a pair of wings and soar above the 9 heavens. At that time, he will no longer be a kun fish, but a kun peng. The black-clothed, white-haired man said calmly. He finally retracted his gaze from the pool and looked calmly at Yi Xian. He was dressed in black and had white hair. He had a handsome appearance and his cheeks seemed to have been carved by a knife. He looked like a young man and was even more worthy of the title of handsome man. However, his eyes were deep and vicissitudes of life did not match his youthful appearance. It was as if he was an old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Demon Master Kunpeng. Time seemed to have stopped and space seemed to have frozen. When the two of them looked at each other, the world suddenly froze. Ripples appeared in the void. The void was slightly distorted. The two of them looked at each other without saying a word. Although neither of them released their auras, an invisible battle had already begun. Pop! Suddenly, a muffled sound came from the void. The Kunpeng took a step back and the void rippled. The stagnant heaven and earth seemed to be moving again at this moment. My fellow cultivator's cultivation is impressive. Kuan Peng nodded and praised him sincerely. You can't be that weak. Yi Xian slowly shook his head and said calmly. Although the two of them did not attack each other, the battle between their minds had already started. This was a competition of potentials. However, Kuan Peng was slightly inferior and was defeated in this invisible battle. However, Yi Xian was very confused. Demon Master Kuan Peng was as famous as the two celestial emperors. Although he was not as powerful as Dong Huangtai and Emperor Jun, the difference was not big. However, in Yi Xian's perception, Demon Master Kuan Peng's cultivation was only an ordinary sage to be. He was no match for him at all. In the Great War of Witches and Demons, I was seriously injured by the two ancestors of Sorcerer. My physical body was destroyed and only my genuine spirit survived. Since then, I have returned to this place to heal my injuries. I am no longer as powerful as before. Kuan Peng smiled bitterly. Hearing Kuan Peng's words, Yi Xian's eyes moved slightly. He said calmly, obviously, those demon kings and immortals outside were also killed by you? My fellow cultivator is right. They were greedy and thought that I had already died. They wanted to steal my inheritance, so I had to kill them. Kuan Peng said softly. Oh, is that so? Yi Xian's mouth curved into a strange smile, which made Kuan Peng's eyes dim. However, they soon returned to normal and did not reveal any strange expression. I wonder why you have come to visit me. Kuan Peng did not answer the question. The ancient demon court has appeared. Yi Xian did not hide anything, nor did he talk nonsense. When he said this, Kuan Peng's face did not change, and he was not shocked at all. In the Great War of Witches and Demons, the two tribes withered. The two celestial emperors led thousands of demon cultivators to recuperate. It is not strange that they have appeared again. But I wonder who you are and why you have come to see me this time. Kuan Peng asked softly. Celestial Emperor Yi Xian. When Yi Xian said these simple words, Kuan Peng directly understood Yi Xian's identity. He looked at Yi Xian with a deep look in his eyes. There are no two suns in the sky, and no two rulers in the people. It seems that my fellow cultivator is the master of the celestial court in this world. However, the ancient demon court has reappeared, and my fellow cultivator's position as the celestial emperor is about to be lost. Even if my fellow cultivator comes to ask me for help, I can't help. Kuan Peng sighed. You are wrong. I am not asking you for help. I hope that you can join the celestial court and become my subject, Yi Xian, and create a real prosperity with me. Yi Xian said calmly, as if he was talking about a very casual thing. However, Kuan Peng's face turned cold when he heard this. He looked at Yi Xian with an extremely unfriendly look. My fellow cultivator, you are so arrogant. Do you know that even East Emperor and Emperor Jun dare not make me submit to them? Your cultivation is not comparable to theirs. Do you think that my cultivation has fallen greatly at this moment, so you want to threaten me with force? Kuan Peng scolded coldly. No, no, no. Yi Xian waved his hand slowly, with a gentle smile on his face. However, his eyes became extremely unpredictable when he looked at Kuan Peng. I'm not someone who takes advantage of others, so I naturally won't do such a thing to you. However, sooner or later, I will have a battle with the ancient demon court, and as the master of 10,000 demons, I'm afraid that you will become my, Yi Xian's, enemy in the future. Then, I can only be disrespectful to you. Yi Xian's voice gradually turned cold. The chaotic divine light steamed out, as if he was going to attack Kuan Peng in the next moment. Kuan Peng's face changed slightly, and he took 3 steps back. He looked at Yi Xian more cautiously. My fellow cultivator, please listen to me. Kuan Peng said quickly. Oh. What do you want to say? Yi Xian sneered. I can swear to my Taoist friend that I will never return to the ancient demon court. If I violate this oath, I will definitely be destroyed. The Kunpeng swore the great heart demon oath with an extremely sincere expression on his face. The great oath of the heart demon was an extremely terrifying oath. If one violated the oath, he would be counterattacked by the heart demon. Not only would his cultivation be unable to improve for the rest of his life, but he would also be in danger of his soul being destroyed. Obviously, Kunpeng swore such a vicious oath to avoid being killed by Yi Xian. My fellow cultivator, I have already sworn to my great oath of the heart demon. With my current cultivation, even if I return to the ancient demon court, I will not be a threat to you at all. Please don't make things difficult for me. Chapter 694. Moreover, my cultivation has dropped greatly. I only want to recover from my injuries here, so I no longer have the heart to participate in the dispute between the three realms. Fellow Taoist, please help me. The Kunpeng bowed in an extremely humble manner as it pleaded with Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed as he looked at the Kunpeng's attitude. He slowly nodded and said, "All right. Since fellow Taoist has sworn the great heart demon oath, if I were to make things difficult for fellow Taoist, it would be obvious that I, Yi Xian, don't have the ability to tolerate others. Remember your vow. I hope you and I will not be enemies in the future." Yi Xian coldly said. He suddenly turned around and returned to his original path. This also caused the Kunpeng to bow. Only when he saw Yi Xian disappear did he straighten his back and let out a dispirited sigh. Alas! At this moment, the Kunpeng seemed to be in his twilight years. He returned to the edge of the lake dispiritedly and then sat down cross-legged to cultivate. It was as if countless years had passed and he had really been recovering from his injuries. The void of primordial spirit and the heavens did not appear. This was a forbidden secret skill in the Immortal scripture and also Yi Xian's trump card. In the past, he had fought with Yuan Ling for a long time with the void of primordial spirit. From this, one could see the horror of this skill. At this moment, Yi Xian escaped into the void and went back to the way he came. He did not release any aura around him and no one could feel his existence. When Yi Xian stepped into the half-step sage to be, he was more proficient in the void of primordial spirit. As long as his aura did not leak out, no one could detect his existence except for the sages. That's right, Yi Xian didn't plan on leaving at all, nor would he leave so easily. This was because there were too many suspicious points on the Kunpeng. Although it seemed to be begging Yi Xian humbly and lowering its attitude to the extreme, it still caused Yi Xian to become even more suspicious. First of all, the white bones outside the passageway was a huge question. The Kunpeng nest was so secretive that even he could only find this place by following the map. How could other people enter this place? Secondly, Kunpeng's attitude was extremely humble, without any trace of the spirit of the Master of Demons. This was simply a fantasy. Kunpeng was an extremely arrogant and fierce being. Otherwise, how could he become the Master of Demons? The third point was also Yi Xian's greatest doubt. One had to know that the Kunpeng was the imperial teacher of the ancient demon court. Even though the two heavenly emperors had to respectfully address him as Demon Master, the Kunpeng had sworn an oath to his heart demon, claiming that he would never return to the ancient demon court. For him to pay such a huge price, there must be a heaven-shaking secret hidden within. Something was wrong with the Kunpeng. These 5 simple words explained what Yi Xian was thinking. He hid in the void to spy on the Kunpeng. He wanted to see what kind of secret the Kunpeng was hiding. After so many years, it was hiding here alone. There were continuous mountains and clear water. This place was a small world. Except for the Kunpeng, there were no other living creatures. Only the black and white fish in the pool were swimming every day. Yi Xian had observed the black and white fish. He was sure that the black and white fish were not living creatures. They were transformed from the real spirit of the Kunpeng and were placed in the pool to cultivate. Obviously, he was seriously injured in the Great War of Witch Demon. This was not fake. Although there was no sun and moon, Yi Xian had the concept of time. It had been 3 months since he left in front of the Kunpeng. However, the Kunpeng was meditating by the pool every day and did not show any strange expression. Wait. Yi Xian was never short of patience. He did not believe that the Kunpeng was fine. This was a silent competition. It depended on whose patience was exhausted. Yi Xian also believed that the Kunpeng must be hiding something. 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years. 100 years passed in a hurry. Yi Xian was in the void. He did not speak or move. He never gave up observing the Kunpeng. However, to Yi Xian's disappointment, the Kunpeng was still cultivating as usual. He rarely left his residence, as if this was his daily life. No, it must be wrong. Even though he was cultivating his body and healing his injuries, he could not do the same thing every day. There must be something wrong. Yi Xian said coldly in his heart. He wanted to calm down again. He wanted to see when the Kunpeng would reveal his secret. 100 years, 1,000 years, 3,000 years, 5,000 years. A full 5,000 years had passed. To mortals, this was simply unimaginable. However, to Yi Xian, although these 5,000 years were boring, he was still observing the Kunpeng while practicing various secret techniques in his mind. Although his cultivation hadn't advanced, his various abilities had become more and more proficient. However, what made Yi Xian even more disappointed was that after 5,000 years, this Kunpeng was truly a difficult fellow to deal with. Normally, other than cultivating himself, he would grow flowers and plants, as if he was a leisurely old man. Wait. Yi Xian's eyes were gloomy. He emptied his mind and practiced the secret skills in the Immortal scripture again. However, the immortal true spirit in his sea of consciousness was running all the time. He was staring at the Kunpeng all the time. 6,000 years, 7,000 years, 9,000 years. A full 9,000 years had passed. During this boring wait, Yi Xian didn't know how many times he wanted to leave. However, he endured it in the end and constantly warned himself in his heart that the Kunpeng was definitely not simple. 10,000 years. When 10,000 years had passed, there was finally a change in the Kunpeng, causing Yi Xian to instantly wake up from his cultivation. When his eyes opened and closed, they silently rotated as he stared fixedly at the Kunpeng. Beside the pool, the Kunpeng's gentleness was gone. His aura became extremely gloomy. He spat out a mouthful of turbid air. His arms were slowly stretching out as if he had been freed. Yi Xian, you almost ruined my plan. When I condense the immortal demon body, the first thing I will do is to destroy your soul. The Kunpeng said coldly. An extremely fierce murderous intent burst out. Apparently, during these 10,000 years, he had been disguising himself. He was afraid that Yi Xian would come back and spy on him secretly. Although the Kunpeng was powerful and did not feel that Yi Xian was spying on him, he always believed that there was no harm in being careful. This was why he had been disguising himself for 10,000 years. It had to be said that the Kunpeng was indeed an ambitious person. In order to keep his secret, he would rather endure 10,000 years of boredom. This was indeed something that ordinary people could not do. Unfortunately, the Kunpeng didn't know that Yi Xian was an even more determined person. He, the Kunpeng, had been able to endure and disguise himself for 10,000 years. Yi Xian had even fought to the death with him and hadn't left. Come. The Kunpeng's face was flushed. He made a spell with his hands. The black and white fish in the pool shot out and merged into his glabella. At this moment, his chi power was rising. His cultivation had reached an extremely terrifying level. He did not look like he had been seriously injured at all. Little ant, if it were not for the fact that killing you would attract attention from the outside world, you would not be able to leave here alive. The Kuan-Peng growled ferociously. Apparently, it was a great humiliation for him to compromise with Yi Xian. If it were not for the secret of this place, he would have killed Yi Xian. How could he beg Yi Xian for his life? Chapter 695. At this moment, Kuan-Peng was at his peak and could be called a peerless expert among the sage-to-be. He was only slightly inferior to Eastern Emperor Tai Emperor Jun. From this, one could see how terrifying Kuan-Peng, the master of demons, was. At this moment, Yi Xian escaped into the void and restrained his aura to the extreme. He stared at Kuan-Peng maliciously. Obviously, Kuan-Peng was much stronger than him at this moment. If Kuan-Peng discovered his existence, they would definitely have a great battle. This was not the result that Yi Xian had been waiting for 10,000 years. He really left. It seems that I have overestimated this guy. Kuan-Peng stood with his hands behind his back and carefully sensed this world. After 2 hours, he murmured and finally confirmed that there was no one else here. The ancestral dragon blood formation is only one step away from completion. As long as I can refine the ancestral dragon's essence blood, I can refine the indestructible demon body that no one has ever cultivated. At that time, even the ancestral Magi's body can't be compared to mine. Kuan-Peng roared excitedly and his expression was even more deranged. He turned into a stream of light and shot toward the east. Ancestral dragon blood formation. Hearing Kuan-Peng's words, Yi Xian murmured. His eyes froze in an instant and a fiery light flashed across his eyes. Yi Xian didn't know what the ancestral dragon blood formation was, but he knew what kind of existence the ancestral dragon was. As everyone knew, there were a total of 3 great tribulations in this world since Pangu created the world. The Great God Investiture Tribulation, the Great Magi-Demon War, and the Great Dragon Han Tribulation. The first 2 were already known by all living things. The Great Dragon Han Tribulation was the first tribulation in the world and almost broke through the untainted land. When Pangu created the world, all living things were ignorant. Hung Jun had yet to become a sage and the 3 pure ones were only Daoyuo Jingxian. In that era, there were 3 strongest races. The Dragon race, the Phoenix race, and the Kylin race. These 3 races were born by the world and were born in the Zenith Heaven realm. They were the favorites of the world and the 3 main characters when the world was created. Phoenixes were the leaders of the birds and lived in the undying volcano. Qilins were the leaders of the beasts and lived in the Buzhou celestial mountain. Dragons were the kings of the sea monsters and occupied the entire ocean. These 3 races were called the 3 races of the untainted land and were the 3 most powerful races in the untainted land. The dragon, Phoenix, and Qilin clans were blessed by the heavens. They were born with great abilities, so they refused to accept each other, which led to the eruption of a great war. The Dragon clan was born with a tyrannical physical body. Ordinary magical treasures and weapons could not harm them. However, the Phoenix clan could be reborn. They were also very powerful. The Qilin clan was not outstanding in any way, but they had a lot of people, which led to the joint attack of the dragon and phoenix. When the dragons and phoenixes had almost wiped out the Kirin clan, they also started fighting among themselves. In the end, the dragon race and the phoenix race both withered away. Even the ancestral dragon fell in the world. The ancestral phoenix also died in the untainted land. Thus, the 3 races completely withdrew from the stage of history. Only then did the liches dominate the untainted land. The topic was a little off topic, but Yi Xian knew something very important. Since the beginning of the world, the race with the strongest physical body was the Wu clan. However, the real strongest race was the 5-clawed golden dragon of the Dragon clan. The 5-clawed golden dragon was the real Dragon clan. As for the dragon kings of the 4 seas, they were only collateral bloodlines of the Azure Dragon, Red Dragon, White Dragon, and so on. They could not be compared with the Golden Dragon clan. However, during the initial tribulation of the Dragon Han clan, the Golden Dragon clan all died out. Even the ancestral dragon fell in the world. From then on, the Golden Dragon clan no longer existed in the world. Thus, the Wu clan obtained the title of having the strongest physical body. The ancestral dragon was the strongest in the Golden Dragon clan. His physical body surpassed that of the 12 ancestors of sorcery in antiquity times. When the Kunpeng mentioned the ancestral dragon blood formation and the ancestral dragon essence blood, how could Yi Xian not be shocked? If Yi Xian could get the ancestral dragon essence blood and use it to refine his Daluo immortal body, Yi Xian was very sure that he would be able to practice the Daluo immortal body to the advanced level. The Daluo immortal body and the indestructible true spirit. When the spirit and body became one, Yi Xian would truly become a sage to be. From then on, as long as the saints did not appear, he would not be afraid of any sage to be. Yi Xian's body and mind were trembling. He had not waited for 10,000 years in vain. This also made him restrain his aura to the extreme and quietly chase after the Kunpeng. Soaring 90,000 miles into the sky, the Kunpeng spread its wings across the 9 heavens. This phrase also proved how fast the Kunpeng was. When he unleashed all of his power, his entire body would disappear into the void. No one would be able to catch his figure. Yi Xian was using the primordial spirit void. His entire body was one with the void, and he was able to capture the Kunpeng's trajectory. This also allowed him to quietly follow behind him. After half a day, a giant mountain that pierced the sky could be faintly seen in the distance. It was like a dragon that stretched across the world. It was also at this time that the Kunpeng's agitated body gradually slowed down. Open! Suddenly, the Kunpeng's face flushed red. He formed a seal with both hands. Extremely dazzling demonic light gushed out from his palms and directly gathered into ancient demonic characters. They interweaved into a mysterious formation that rumbled and rotated in the sky. Rumble. The sky shook and the void swayed. This part of the world became extremely distorted. The giant mountain that pierced the sky quickly became illusory until its original appearance was revealed. There was a sky-piercing mountain and a gigantic dragon skeleton. The dragon skeleton was hundreds of thousands of miles long and was coiled around the sky-piercing mountain. The pale golden skeleton was emitting specks of golden light, and a wild and boundless aura was swirling around it. The remains of the ancestral dragon. Yi Xian hid in the void. When he saw this scene, he roared in his heart and almost leaked his aura. This also proved how excited he was. Rumble. Before Yi Xian could react, the Kunpeng laughed maniacally and surged towards the giant mountain. This also caused Yi Xian to quickly follow behind him. However, there was a trace of viciousness in his eyes. On the giant mountain that pierced the sky, streaks of blood-colored formation patterns interweaved in the void and gathered into a strange and mysterious formation pattern. It was buzzing and rotating, releasing a strange and unpredictable aura. There was a blood pool that was emitting a piercingly cold golden light. The golden blood pool was steaming and bubbles were rising from it. An extremely domineering aura was leaking to the outside world. However, there was a blood-colored formation pattern that completely blocked the domineering aura. The Kunpeng stood proudly on the peak. He stared at the golden blood pool in front of him and his eyes flickered with excitement. After that, he did not hesitate and quickly walked towards the golden blood pool. Finally, the Kunpeng came to the front of the golden blood pool. He did not move forward and just looked at the thing in front of him. There was a complicated and trembling light in his eyes. The ancestral dragon blood formation has been completed. However, the blood essence of 10,000 demons is still lacking. If this damn Yi Xian did not find this place, why would I take the risk to refine the ancestral dragon blood essence in advance? The Kunpeng murmured with hatred. No, Yi Xian already knows about this place. I have to take the risk. If he spreads the news that I am here, the secret of the ancestral dragon blood essence will be exposed sooner or later. Chapter 696. The Kunpeng was talking to himself as he paced around the golden blood pool. Apparently, the golden blood pool was formed by the ancestral dragon's blood essence, and this was his biggest secret. But the 10,000 demons' essence blood is still lacking. If I forcefully integrate the ancestral dragon's essence blood into my body to cultivate the undying demon body, I'm afraid it will be extremely dangerous. The Kunpeng's face was gloomy and his eyes were filled with hesitation. In the void, Yi Xian squinted his eyes and a wisp of enlightenment appeared in his mind. It also allowed Yi Xian to finally solve the previous puzzle. Most of the white bones that died outside the passage were demon kings. Apparently, they were all killed by the Kunpeng. However, the reason why they could find this place was because the Kunpeng had lured them here for the so-called 10,000 demons' essence blood. If Yi Xian guessed correctly, the Kunpeng wanted to integrate the ancestral dragon's essence blood into his body, but his body couldn't withstand such power. The 10,000 demons' essence blood should be a medium that could reduce the domineering power of the ancestral dragon's essence blood, allowing him to swallow it without any risk. As the saying goes, one can know the whole leopard from a single spot. In the past, the North Sea Dragon King invited all the demon kings to a banquet and even said that the Kunpeng's inheritance was in the North Sea. Obviously, the North Sea Dragon King didn't have good intentions. He wanted to lure all the demon kings here so that the Kunpeng could collect the 10,000 demons' essence blood. From this, it could be seen that the North Sea Dragon King was already controlled by the Kunpeng. However, the Kunpeng never expected that the North Sea Dragon King would die in the hands of Yi Xian and the entire North Sea Dragon Palace would be slaughtered. This also happened to cut off the Kunpeng's source of collecting the 10,000 demons' essence blood. At this point, all the puzzles about the North Sea had been solved. The Kunpeng humbly swore the great oath of the heart demon to him. The white bones outside the passage and the reason why the North Sea Dragon King invited all the demon kings to explore the North Sea had been revealed. However, a tinge of fear grew in Yi Xian's heart. If he really came here with the map back then, he would definitely be killed by the Kunpeng with his cultivation. At that time. Fortunately, Yi Xian was an extremely cautious person and a very secretive person. In the end, he wasn't blinded by desire and didn't come to explore this place back then. At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes narrowed as he watched from the shadows. His gaze towards the Kunpeng was even more cruel. He was even more determined to obtain the ancestral dragon's blood essence. This was because Yi Xian could completely feel that if he could use the ancestral dragon's blood essence to refine his great Luo immortal body, he would definitely be able to reach large success and truly step into the quasi-sage realm. However, Yi Xian didn't attack the Kunpeng at this moment because Yi Xian knew his own limits. At this moment, the Kunpeng was at its peak state. With his current cultivation, he wasn't a match for the Kunpeng. Moreover, if he really did appear, the two of them would definitely have an earth-shattering battle for the ancestral dragon's essence blood. The space here would be shattered into pieces, and it would definitely attract the attention of the outside world. Then it would not only be a battle between the two of them. Any sage-to-be who received the news would join in the battle. The danger involved would be unimaginable. Obviously, the Kunpeng was afraid of such a thing happening. The Kunpeng's attitude towards Yi Xian was extremely humble. Otherwise, how could the Kunpeng be so humble to Yi Xian with his fierce and arrogant temperament? Wait. Yi Xian had waited for 10,000 years. He didn't care about this little bit of time. He had to make his move when he was most confident. The essence blood could only belong to him. Heaven and earth were silent, and not a sound could be heard. After 3 days and 3 nights, the Kunpeng finally returned from his contemplation. His gloomy face turned calm, as if he had made a decision. Although the essence blood of 10,000 demons is still lacking and can't completely neutralize the overbearing power of the essence blood of ancestral dragon, I have to take the risk. This place has been exposed to Yi Xian. Sooner or later, trouble will arise. But if I really activate the ancestral dragon blood formation, the power of the essence blood of ancestral dragon will be fully released. If there are any disturbances, I'm afraid all my efforts will be in vain. The Kunpeng said coldly, his eyes looking around the void. This also made Yi Xian restrain his aura. He didn't expect the Kunpeng to be so cautious at this time. It seems that I'm overthinking. 10,000 years have passed. Yi Xian has already left. Although there is no one to protect me here, who can find this place? The Kunpeng laughed at himself, feeling that he was too suspicious. Fight. As long as I can cultivate the indestructible demon body, no one can be my opponent except a sage. When I find the Hongmeng immortal qi, I can even peek at the position of the seventh sage. The Kunpeng roared ferociously. He made a mysterious demon art with both hands. His body was surrounded by bright demon light. Ancient demon characters appeared and were directly inserted into the ancestral dragon blood formation. Rumble. Heaven and earth shook. The blood formation rotated. The ancestral dragon blood formation in the void fell directly into the golden blood pool, causing a drastic change to the blood formation. Buzz! The ancestral dragon blood essence revolved rapidly until it turned into a terrifying vortex. Waves of destructive power erupted from the ancestral dragon blood pool. Dazzling golden light soared into the sky. Numerous phantoms of golden dragons tore through space and time in all directions. Dragon roars that could shatter the world faintly resounded. It was a terrifying scene that no one dared to look directly at. Now! The Kunpeng roared excitedly. He took a step forward and jumped into the ancestral dragon blood pool. He was submerged in the ancestral dragon essence blood. At the same time, he made a mysterious demon art and began to absorb the extremely powerful power of the ancestral dragon essence blood. Ugh! The Kunpeng let out a groan. His face was extremely distorted. Under the ancestral dragon essence blood, his body was cracking inch by inch. Obviously, the ancestral dragon essence blood was extremely domineering. Even though the Kunpeng's cultivation was terrifying, he was still greatly tempered by it. At this moment, Yi Xian squinted his eyes and stared at the Kunpeng in the ancestral dragon blood pool. A cruel and sinister look flashed across his eyes. He slowly raised his hand as if he was going to attack the Kunpeng in the next moment. Suddenly, Yi Xian frowned. He slowly put down his hand and didn't attack the Kunpeng in the end. It wasn't that Yi Xian didn't want to attack the Kunpeng, but Yi Xian discovered something. If he really attacked the Kunpeng when he was cultivating, even if he could severely injure the Kunpeng, the power of the ancestral dragon essence blood would dissipate between heaven and earth. This was definitely not the result he wanted to see. You want the ancestral dragon essence blood? You're dreaming. Yi Xian roared cruelly. He didn't hesitate anymore. His primordial spirit void's secret technique disappeared without a trace. He suddenly appeared in the void and jumped into the ancestral dragon blood pool with a greedy and ruthless look. Since he couldn't kill the Kunpeng, Yi Xian would snatch it and see who could devour the ancestral dragon essence blood. Chapter 697. Buzz. The undying immortal scripture and the calamity transcender technique madly circulated. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the other side of the ancestral dragon blood pool and directly carried out his plundering plan. His entire body turned into a black vortex that crazily devoured the tyrannical power of the ancestral dragon essence blood. Yi Xian. Suddenly, a thunderous roar came from the Kunpeng's mouth. He opened his eyes and looked at Yi Xian. His eyes were filled with extreme shock and anger, and he simply could not believe his eyes. Never would the Kunpeng have imagined that Yi Xian would appear in front of him at such a critical moment and enter the ancestral dragon blood pool with him to madly absorb the power of the ancestral dragon essence blood. This simply made him feel like he was in a dream, and he could not believe what he was experiencing. "I'll kill you." After a dozen breaths of time, the Kunpeng suddenly woke up. His face was savage and twisted as he roared at Yi Xian. He even wanted to get up and kill Yi Xian at this moment. But before he could do anything, the Kunpeng's expression changed. In the end, he did not stand up because he had already activated the ancestral dragon blood formation and was immersed in cultivation. If he really attacked Yi Xian, the tyrannical power of the ancestral dragon in his body would backfire on him and he would suffer heavy injuries. Not only was the Kunpeng in such a situation, Yi Xian was no different from him. He was currently violently absorbing the power of the ancestral dragon's blood essence. He only felt a tearing pain in his body, and the domineering fiery energy was constantly tempering his Daluo immortal body. "Damn bastard, I'll definitely kill you." The Kunpeng had no other choice but to continue madly devouring the power of the ancestral dragon essence blood. But even though he hated Yi Xian to the extreme, there was nothing he could do. This was a silent competition, but it was also a crazy plundering. It was a competition to see who could absorb more ancestral dragon essence blood and who would be the final winner. "Ah!" The Kunpeng roared ferociously as it circulated its demonic arts to the extreme. It madly absorbed the energy of the ancestral dragon's blood essence. The extremely domineering energy caused its body to become even more damaged, but its aura was rising steadily. Yi Xian's face twisted, his robes flapping as veins bulged out from his body. His physical body was already extremely powerful, and it had been boosted to a terrifying level by the Tribulation Transcender art. At this moment, it was madly devouring the ancestral dragon's essence blood. His origin immortal body, which had not been upgraded for a long time, was undergoing an unimaginable transformation. If the speed at which the Kunpeng absorbed the ancestral dragon's blood essence was like the surging of rivers and streams, then the speed at which Yi Xian absorbed the ancestral dragon's blood essence was like the howling of an ocean. There was no comparison between the two, and it wasn't something that the Kunpeng could compare to. Kunpeng was indeed very strong. Whether it was in terms of physical body or cultivation, it could be called an outstanding talent of the three realms, but this was only when compared to others. Yi Xian was different. He walked the path of becoming a saint through strength, so his physical body was terrifying to the extreme. Moreover, he was currently using the Tribulation Transcender art, which was a heaven-defying devouring technique. In this silent contest for the ancestral dragon's essence blood, Yi Xian completely crushed Kunpeng. Time passed, and the years alternated. Although there was no sun and moon in this small world, there was a concept of time. In this silent contest between the two, 10,000 years had passed. 10,000 years was not worth mentioning for immortals, but it was unimaginable for mortals. The ancestral dragon's essence blood was not endless, but the domineering energy it contained was too terrifying. Although the two of them were madly devouring it, they had to refine this domineering energy every once in a while. This was an extremely long process. At the same time, Kunpeng's mood was extremely gloomy because he was completely at a disadvantage in this contest. Even if he ignored the injuries on his body and crazily devoured the ancestral dragon's essence blood, he could not catch up with Yi Xian's speed at all. At this moment, Kunpeng had only devoured 20% of the ancestral dragon's essence blood, while Yi Xian occupied 60%, which was 3 times more than him. How could Kunpeng not hate Yi Xian to the extreme? Rumble. Suddenly, something that made Kunpeng even more horrified and angry happened. Yi Xian completely turned into darkness, and his whole body was like a terrifying black vortex. The speed at which he absorbed the ancestral dragon's essence blood increased again. This simply made Kunpeng's jaw drop. He couldn't wait to stop devouring the ancestral dragon's essence blood and attack Yi Xian. Unfortunately, Kunpeng was powerless at this moment because the domineering energy of the ancestral dragon's essence blood was also wreaking havoc in his body. If he really attacked Yi Xian at all costs, he would definitely be devoured by the ancestral dragon's essence blood. It was very likely that he would be killed by Yi Xian instead. This was not the result he wanted to see. Bastard, I will definitely kill you. Kunpeng had already gone mad to the extreme. He finally stopped paying attention to Yi Xian and continued to keep his body from shattering while refining the power of the ancestral dragon's essence blood. However, he had already regarded Yi Xian as a dead man in his heart. Once the two of them finished refining the ancestral dragon's essence blood, he would definitely cut Yi Xian into 1,000 pieces. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, another 5,000 years had passed. The ancestral dragon pool of blood was getting clearer and clearer, and the golden blood was already thinning. It would not be long before the two of them completely absorbed the essence blood. It was also at this moment that Yi Xian underwent an extremely strange change. His body seemed to be forged from golden glass, and there were even illusory dragon shadows coiling around his body. The faint sound of a dragon's roar could be heard from the other side of the void. Rumble. At this moment, Yi Xian's face was extremely twisted. His origin immortal body had been tempered to the peak by the ancestral dragon's essence blood, and he was only a sliver away from reaching grand completion. Moreover, the indestructible true spirit in his sea of consciousness was madly revolving, and an extremely terrifying and obscure aura was blooming around him. Not enough, still not enough. I've absorbed 80% of the ancestral dragon's essence blood, but I'm still a sliver away from reaching grand completion. Yi Xian was madly roaring in his mind. His eyes were already blood-red and filled with extreme unwillingness. The tribulation transcender art he was forming with both hands was slightly stagnant, and he suddenly looked in the direction of the Kunpeng. It was clear that he had absorbed 80% of the ancestral dragon's essence blood, and the Kunpeng had naturally devoured the other 20%. This was also why Yi Xian had finally set his sights on the Kunpeng. Tribulation transcender art. Suddenly, Yi Xian let out a ferocious roar. Blood was actually gushing out of his 7 orifices, and his body was cracking like a spider web. He actually ignored the backlash of the ancestral dragon's blood essence and stood up, directly slamming his palm towards the Kunpeng. At this moment, the Kunpeng was immersed in refining the ancestral dragon's essence blood, and his indestructible demonic body was on the verge of completion. Although he had only obtained 20% of the ancestral dragon's power, it was just enough. But the Kunpeng had never imagined that before he could attack Yi Xian would ignore the backlash from the ancestral dragon's power and attack him. Do you want to die with me? The Kunpeng suddenly opened his eyes and looked in panic at Yi Xian. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not answer. He suddenly appeared in front of him, and that bloody palm slammed down at the top of his head. Chapter 698. I'll fight you to the death. Facing Yi Xian's attack, Kunpeng could easily dodge it if he was an ordinary person. However, he was in the middle of cultivation and the ancestral dragon's blood essence was extremely overbearing. He didn't dare to move rashly and naturally couldn't dodge Yi Xian's terrifying attack. However, Kunpeng wouldn't wait for his death. He forcibly diverted part of his strength and raised his hand to hit Yi Xian's chest. Obviously, he wanted to force Yi Xian to retreat. Bang! With a muffled sound, Kunpeng's palm hit Yi Xian's chest, which caused Yi Xian's sternum to collapse. However, he didn't dodge and let Kunpeng hit his chest. Meanwhile, his palm had already landed on Kunpeng's head. An excited and ferocious smile appeared on Yi Xian's face. Devour! Rumble! Yi Xian roared ferociously. His palm on Kunpeng's head released an extremely terrifying suction force. Strands of ancestral dragon's blood essence shot out from Kunpeng's head and were being devoured by Yi Xian. You're courting death. Feeling that his ancestral dragon's blood essence was leaking out violently, Kun Peng's eyes turned blood red. He crazily hit Yi Xian with his palms. However, no matter how he hit Yi Xian and made Yi Xian spurt blood, Yi Xian's palm never moved away from his head. "Give me back my ancestral dragon's blood essence." Kun Peng roared miserably as if he had gone mad. However, he could clearly feel that the ancestral dragon's blood essence that he had painstakingly refined was being devoured by Yi Xian at an extremely fast speed. The undying demon body that he was about to cultivate was also being pushed back. Puff! Kun Peng spat out a mouthful of demon blood. It wasn't because he was injured by Yi Xian, but because he was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. The ancestral dragon's blood essence that he had painstakingly refined had all been taken away by Yi Xian. "I'll kill you." Suddenly, at this moment, when the ancestral dragon's blood essence completely disappeared from the Kun Peng's body, he could finally use his full cultivation. Demonic light that could shatter the heavens and earth soared into the sky, and a roar that could shatter mountains and rivers could be heard. Die! The Kunpeng fist was the strongest demonic art of the Kunpeng. The fist could destroy the stars and kill everything. This was not only the strongest fist of the Kunpeng, but it also contained his extreme hatred for Yi Xian. Bang! With a punch, Kunpeng sent Yi Xian flying away. The entire sky-piercing mountain collapsed, and the hundreds of thousands of miles-long skeleton of the dragon ancestor collapsed as well. Above the firmament, in the void, the sky-piercing mountain turned into dust, the ancestral dragon blood pond shattered, and all of its power was devoured by Yi Xian. This made Kunpeng even more furious. He stood in the sky, and the demonic light that could shatter the heaven and earth exploded. "Little bastard, I want to eat your flesh and drink your blood." The Kunpeng roared and was about to attack Yi Xian. All of a sudden, Yi Xian's figure froze as he sat cross-legged in the sky. A curtain of primal chaos covered him, and his body glowed. This was an indescribable light, and an obscure aura bloomed around him, causing people to feel an extremely oppressive feeling when they looked at him. "What's going on?" The Kunpeng's expression changed drastically, and an extreme fear rose in his heart. He was about to attack Yi Xian, but he stopped abruptly. He looked at Yi Xian in shock. The Kunpeng could be called the master of demons, not only because of his cultivation, but also because of his knowledge. He had dabbled in all kinds of demonic arts in the world. At this moment, Yi Xian gave him a terrifying feeling of being on the brink of death, which made the Kunpeng extremely terrified. All heaven's demonic arts. Like a dream. Untraceable for eternity. Who can defeat him? The myriad heavens and realms were chanting. The world suddenly darkened, and a wisp of chaotic light fell from the sky toward Yi Xian. The sound of chanting reverberated in all directions, making people's souls tremble. Once you become a sage to be, you can control all demonic arts. Yi Xian's body was glowing. It was an extreme light, which had never appeared in the three realms, but it appeared on Yi Xian's body at this moment. Rumble. The space-time of the world was twisting, and all things in the world were being destroyed. Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. His pupils were like two chaotic stars rotating, and it seemed that all things in the world would be destroyed in his eyes. He became a sage to be. 27,000 years had passed, and Yi Xian had not waited in vain. After seizing the Kunpeng's great fortune, he had finally become a sage to be. Yes, a sage to be. A sage to be who had proven his Tao through strength, a realm that could make Yi Xian truly fearless of his enemies. The 12 ancestral shamans and the 2 celestial emperors of the ancient Fei court, Yi Xian could finally be fearless and truly dare to face these great enemies head-on. Now that he had become a sage to be, he had to do all the things that he did not dare to do in the past. He wanted to see who would dare to defy his will, Yi Xian. Crack! Yi Xian clenched his fists, causing space to explode and terrifying spatial cracks to appear. When the origin immortal body reached great success, he had a body comparable to the 12 ancestral shamans. Perhaps Yi Xian's body was even stronger than the 12 ancestral shamans. After all, he had absorbed all the essence blood of the ancestral dragon, and the ancestral dragon was known as the strongest body in the world. Mastery of the Zenith Heaven immortal body was only one of them. When the undying true spirit and the Zenith Heaven immortal body were in a state of equilibrium, Yi Xian's cultivation had undergone a tremendous change, and his level of life had completely broken free from the shackles of an immortal. Sage to be. These two simple words represented a new level of existence. This was completely different from an immortal, and it was an indescribable level of existence. For example, while immortals could live forever, a sage to be could create their own world. Although it was only a minor world, one could see that there was an enormous difference between the two. A sage to be could peek into the laws of primal chaos and was not limited to the laws of the three realms. The magical powers they contained were beyond the imagination of an immortal. Power, endless power rumbled and surged within Yi Xian's body. He seemed to be able to destroy all things with a thought. Yi Xian was very sure that as long as the saints did not attack him, he would not fear any of the sage to be. However, Yi Xian was not sure how strong his current cultivation was. This was because he had never seen the 12 ancestral shamans, nor had he seen the Eastern Emperor Tai or Di Jun, so he could not compare them. Although cultivation was not the same as battle strength, and everyone had their own trump cards, Yi Xian was very confident. Whether it was the ancestral shamans, the two demonic emperors, or even some mysterious sage to be, Yi Xian did not fear them at all. This was because his magical powers were not inferior to theirs. The immortal scripture was extremely mysterious. It contained too many secret techniques and magical powers, as well as terrifying techniques that could only be displayed by a sage to be. Now, Yi Xian could also officially cultivate it. Moreover, Yi Xian also had the Tribulation Transcender's Devour, which was a heaven-defying technique that could devour the innate magical powers of others. This imperceptibly increased Yi Xian's terrifying foundation. Yi Xian. Suddenly, just as Yi Xian was pondering, Kunpeng's angry roar came. This also made Yi Xian return from his thoughts and look at this person calmly. Chapter 699. At this moment, the Kunpeng's eyes were bloodshot. His eyes were as red as blood as he looked at Yi Xian with eyes that couldn't be washed away by the 3 rivers and 4 seas. However, from time to time, a mixture of surprise and bewilderment flashed through his eyes. Kunpeng could not be blamed for this. The essence blood of the ancestor dragon was his lucky chance. He had been hiding here for countless years because of the essence blood of the ancestor dragon. But in the end, it helped Yi Xian. How could he not be furious? Moreover, Kunpeng could feel that Yi Xian had swallowed all the essence blood of the ancestor dragon. At this moment, it gave him an extremely terrifying feeling, which he had only experienced from a sage. But so what? After all, Yi Xian was not a sage. Kunpeng was not a weakling among the sage to be. If he did not seek justice for himself today, he would become the biggest laughing stock in the future. Thank you for your help, my friend. Yi Xian did not have any terrifying power. He bowed to Kunpeng with his hands folded in front of his chest. His attitude was extremely sincere. But for Kunpeng, Yi Xian's attitude was the biggest insult to him. Yi Xian, don't push me too far. Kunpeng roared with hatred. An extremely violent aura filled the air and a terrifying demon light shook the 9 heavens. He looked at Yi Xian with extreme hatred. In fact, Yi Xian did not have much killing intent for Demon Master Kunpeng, because there was no so-called hatred between them. If he had not taken away Kunpeng's lucky chance, he would not have become a sage to be in such a short time. However, Yi Xian also understood that if he had been robbed of such a great lucky chance, he would have skinned the other party and broken his bones. Even so, he would not be able to relieve the hatred in his heart. Today, I can become a sage to be because of the essence blood of the ancestor dragon. If you are willing, why don't you join my celestial court? I can promise you. Yi Xian said calmly. But before he could finish his words, Kunpeng's violent roar was heard. The demon light that exploded in all directions was rolling. Yi Xian, you little brat. You've gone too far by stealing my fortune. Today, either you die or I die. Rumble. The Tongtian art penetrated the ground and the demonic light covered the sky. The Kunpeng finally couldn't stand Yi Xian's humiliation anymore, which made him fall into a state of extreme insanity. The ancient demonic art was activated and the Tongtian art was launched. He directly attacked Yi Xian. I gave you face, but you don't want it. Yi Xian frowned, and his face instantly darkened. He didn't seem to have done anything, but he merely struck out with his palm, and the small world exploded. The boundless world cracked inch by inch, as if it was about to explode. Bang! The fist and palm collided, causing the heavens and earth to shatter. The Kunpeng flew backwards, and in the battle of physical bodies, its resplendent fists became a bloody mess. It was all because Yi Xian's physical body was already terrifying to the extreme. Kunpeng art. After being defeated by Yi Xian, the Kunpeng let out a shrill roar. The hatred in his eyes became more intense because he knew that after Yi Xian devoured all the essence blood of the ancestor sorcerer, his physical body was no match for Yi Xian. This also made him launch his most powerful art directly. He was determined to kill Yi Xian here and now. Rumble. Something extremely terrifying happened. The heaven and earth rumbled and shook. Wisps of black and white chi shot up into the sky from the Kunpeng's head. The entire Kunpeng nest was instantly destroyed and the two of them appeared in the northern underworld sea. Whoosh, the waves in the northern underworld sea were rolling. The Kunpeng's body was glowing. This was the black and white light, and it was the chi of origin. Because he was born by heaven and earth and was the only Kunpeng in the world, he was born with unimaginable strength. At this moment, he was really angry. He was determined to fight Yi Xian to the death. Buzz! Suddenly, the Kunpeng fell into the northern underworld sea. Endless black and white chi rippled out, causing the entire northern underworld sea to be rolling. It was as if an extremely terrifying creature was being nurtured in it. A black and white fish, whose end could not be seen, was swaying its tail at the bottom of the northern underworld sea. The waves that swept the world were rolling. As the sound of the waves became louder and louder, the black and white fish came out of the water and soared into the ninth heaven. Crack! Thunder exploded in the dark sky as azure lightning tore through the sky. The black and white fish underwent an extremely terrifying change, and amidst the rumbling of the black and white energies, it actually transformed into a strange rock. Its fierce eyes were staring at Yi Xian, and an aura that could destroy the heavens and earth rippled out from the rock's body. There was a fish in the northern underworld. Its name was the Kun. The Kun was so big that it was thousands of miles long. When it turned into a bird, its name was the Peng. The back of the Peng bird was thousands of miles long. When it flew, its wings were like the clouds in the sky. It covered the sky and covered the earth. It was boundless. This was not enough to describe the terror of the Kunpeng at this moment. He finally turned into his true form under the burning anger. This also proved how much hatred he had for Yi Xian. Yi Xian, you brat, I will eat your flesh and drink your blood. I will make sure that you will never be reincarnated. In the sky, the Kunpeng let out a fierce roar. Its golden claws fell towards Yi Xian. The boundless world was gradually collapsing. This proved how terrifying his attack was. Dharma and martial universe. Yi Xian smiled coldly. The chaotic fog was steaming. His body was violently expanding until he turned into a giant that could hold up the sky. He punched towards the Kunpeng. Kill! The Kunpeng roared. It spread its wings and covered the entire sky. It rushed towards Yi Xian crazily and fiercely. Bang! 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 An extremely shocking scene appeared. In this small world, a giant that could support the heavens and the earth was fighting with a rock. The world in all directions was collapsing inch by inch. The scene of the destruction of the heavens and the earth was enough to make one's soul leave their bodies. Boom! The Peng's blood sprinkled in the sky. The black and white qi disappeared without a trace. Yi Xian's face was cold and calm. Every punch not only contained his dharma and Taoism, but also his body that was not inferior to the ancestor of sorcerers. He also posed a great threat to the Kunpeng. With one punch, the sky collapsed. The Kunpeng's body that could cover the sky and the earth was sent flying. Yi Xian took a step forward and the stars moved. His palms were like millstones of heaven and earth. He directly grabbed the Kunpeng's claws. As the Kunpeng let out a shrill cry, an extremely terrifying thing happened. Yi Xian was like a chaos giant. He was more like one of the legendary 3,000 demons. He fiercely swung the Kunpeng's huge body and constantly smashed it into the vast earth. His violent and unreasonable way was simply terrifying to the extreme. Bang! Tens of thousands of miles of mountains collapsed into dust. A large amount of blood spilled on the earth. The Kunpeng was screaming loudly. He wanted to get rid of Yi Xian's violent means of killing. However, under the pressure of Yi Xian's divine sense and body, he could not reverse the situation at all. Bang! 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 The vast earth shook violently. The boundless sea surged with huge waves. Mountains collapsed one after another. The Kunpeng's blood spilled on every inch of space. It was as if the Kunpeng had become a toy in Yi Xian's hands. He was smashing the earth with Yi Xian's arms. Chapter 700. Bang! Finally, with a loud explosion, the Kunpeng was smashed into the ground. The huge Kunpeng's celestial body was bathed in blood. As the black and white qi slowly dissipated, he finally turned into a human again. Buzz! The void swayed and rippled. Yi Xian's body, which was like a chaos giant, was gradually shrinking until he returned to his original appearance. He was looking down at the Kunpeng on the ground from the firmament. Powerful. Very strong, so strong that even Kunpeng felt despair. At this moment, the Kunpeng felt extremely bitter because he had been at a disadvantage from the beginning to the end. He did not even have the strength to fight back, which made his eyes filled with despair. Thump, thump, thump. Yi Xian walked slowly through the air towards the Kunpeng. His expression was emotionless, and his body didn't emit any aura. However, with every step he took, a black lotus would rise from beneath his feet before disappearing into the air. Lotus blooms with every step. The great Tao is within reach. How is this possible? Looking at the black lotus that disappeared under Yi Xian's feet, the Kunpeng trembled and growled. He could not believe his eyes and was dumbfounded on the spot. According to legend, every move of the sage-to-be not only contained the power of heaven and earth, but also showed his dharma and Tao. When a sage-to-be could transform into a lotus, it meant that he was very likely to become a saint in the future. The two saintly Buddhas of the West sat cross-legged, the three pure ones had green lotuses around them, and Goddess Nuwa had obtained the merit of mending the heavens and creating humans. Every move of hers was accompanied by golden lotuses. These were all signs that they had yet to become saints. The Kunpeng was defeated by Yi Xian. When he saw the black lotus that disappeared under Yi Xian's feet, he could not believe his eyes. Was Yi Xian the seventh heaven-destined saint? And the essence blood of the ancestor dragon that he got was just a gift for Yi Xian? Unwillingness, desperation, and palpitations. All kinds of complicated emotions grew in Kunpeng's heart. a bitter smile emerged from the corners of his mouth. Gradually, he looked at Yi Xian calmly. When a person was about to die, he would be indifferent to everything. Although Kunpeng didn't know what kind of person Yi Xian was, the fact that Yi Xian could wait for 10,000 years to spy on his secret proved that he was not a kind person. He was also an ambitious and ruthless person. The Kunpeng knew that Yi Xian wouldn't let him off. In the end, the only outcome for him was death. Wang! The black lotus disappeared under Yi Xian's feet. Finally, he stood in front of Kunpeng, looking down at Yi Xian calmly. No one could tell what Yi Xian was thinking at the moment. You are very strong. You are so strong that I feel despair. Even Di Jun is no match for you, said Yi Futian. Kunpeng said calmly. When he was facing death, he had seen through everything. He even praised Jian Wushuang from the bottom of his heart. Do you think I want to kill you? Suddenly, a gentle smile appeared on Yi Xian's face. His voice was gentle and easygoing. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Kunpeng was stunned. He said, "Will you let me go?" Fellow Taoist, you're right. I've snatched away your opportunity. Logically speaking, we shouldn't rest until one of us is dead. I should kill you here. Yi Xian nodded. However, he was smiling all the time. His eyes became more profound as he looked at Kunpeng. Then what are you waiting for? Kunpeng was not stupid. Before Yi Xian took action, he had already vaguely known what Yi Xian was thinking. This made him look at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. I presume that fellow Taoist has already guessed that I would like to invite fellow Taoist to join the heavenly court and grant fellow Taoist the position of demon master. It's no different from fellow Taoist's position in the ancient demon court. Yi Xian spoke tirelessly, his words extremely sincere. It was obvious that Yi Xian had never thought of killing the Kunpeng. This was because the Kunpeng was extremely useful to him, and it was also a great weapon against the ancient demon court. Kunpeng was the master of all demons. Although he was defeated by Yi Xian, it seemed that he could not withstand a single blow. That was because Yi Xian had stepped into the sage-to-be. He was a sage-to-be who proved his Tao through strength. That was why Kunpeng looked so weak. However, Kunpeng was definitely a terrifying figure among the sage-to-be. If he could join the celestial court, it would be of great help to Yi Xian. This was only one of the reasons. The real reason was Kunpeng's identity. Master of all demons. These 4 simple words fully explained Kunpeng's position in the demon clan. The ancient demon court had reappeared. Nuwa's decree was about to be announced to the 3 realms. At that time, billions of demon clans in the 3 realms would be under the ancient demon court. This was already an extremely terrifying force. Saint Nuwa, the 2 demon emperors, and the master of all demons were the 4 most respected figures in the demon clan. If Kunpeng, the master of all demons, could join the celestial court, it would be a heavy blow to the ancient demon court. An irreparable loophole would appear in the ancient demon court. It would make billions of demon clans wonder why Kunpeng, the master of all demons, would betray the ancient demon court. This was Yi Xian's chess piece. This was also his real intention of looking for Kunpeng. However, he did not expect that he would seize Kunpeng's opportunity here and directly step into the sage-to-be. Impossible. Suddenly, Kunpeng sternly refused without any hesitation. Fellow Taoist, are you forcing me to kill you? Yi Xian frowned, and his voice gradually turned cold. Yi Xian, you took my opportunity first. You and I are mortal enemies. Moreover, I am the master of all demons. If I really join your celestial court, how can I stand in the demon clan? How can I face the 2 demon emperors? Won't I be ridiculed by the creatures in the 3 realms? Kunpeng sneered. Although he did not want to die, his dignity would not allow him to submit to Yi Xian. He could not accept this at all. Hearing Kunpeng's words, Yi Xian nodded. Just as Kunpeng said, if he really joined the celestial court and became Yi Xian's subject, billions of demon clans would certainly be disgraced, although they would be puzzled. This was also the reason why Kunpeng sternly refused. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and became silent. After a full 10 breaths, he was no longer gloomy and a smile appeared on his face again. Fellow Taoist, let me ask you a question. If you are still unwilling to join the celestial court after answering, I will leave with you. I will not make things difficult for you. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Kunpeng was stunned. He looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression and then asked tentatively, "Are you serious?" "I am a man of my word." "How can I be a man of my word?" Yi Xian said with a smile. "Well, what do you want to ask?" Kunpeng said seriously. "I want to ask you, fellow Taoist. In the great calamity of the Wu tribe, both the Wu tribe and the ancient demon court suffered great losses. Now that the ancient demon court has reappeared, do you think Dong Huangtai and Emperor Jun can lead billions of demon clans to destroy the Wu tribe?" Yi Xian asked calmly, "You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.